Miss B. Hanley here, and today we are continuing reading Scythe by Neal Shusterman. I have it right here. We ended off right in the middle of part 2 last week, and so we're gonna try and get through part 2 today. That's the main goal, is just to get through part 2, and then so I also wanted to go through the fan cast again. We did it last time, but this time I want to pick out some of the actors that I would really like and maybe adding them to a graphic of some sort, possibly. I'm not quite sure where I was going with that yet, but maybe that's something we can do. Okay, so I guess just turn this down a little bit more. I guess let's go ahead and go to the Fancast website. Okay, so last time we were here, we saw a bunch of different characters. This is the whole series. I think I just want to do just the first book. Yeah, I think that's what we did last time. We did just the first book, and some of these people have changed. Some of these people have changed since the last time we were here. So let's take a look. Let's do Citra first. Again, this one, she was different yesterday, although I do like the new person. Yeah, they had Zendaya. I kind of like Taylor. Who did I say yesterday? Okay, I did say Amanda Stenberg, because she's beautiful. Helena Howard was the other one I said yesterday. Or I said the other day. I said last week. I keep saying yesterday. I think I want to go with, I don't know, Taylor Russell looks really good, actually. Okay, so let's pull some of these images. We're just going to save it to my, downloads, save some pictures to my downloads, and we'll make our cast. Okay, yeah, I think those are the two I like the most. Helena Howard and Taylor Russell. Okay, actually, Ruby Barker looks really cool too. She looks really good too for Citra. Yeah, I don't know. That's tough. I'm going to take her picture as well. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's go back. Let's look at Rowan. The guy they have for Rowan now, don't remember him from last time we tried this. I don't remember this. I do remember Tanner. I did like Tanner, so I'm gonna save his picture. He was the main one. I did not like him. He looked a little too mean. Looks a little too mean in this picture. I think he needs to look like not mean at least in the first book. He needs to look not mean. Trying not to spoil the ending for that one. Is there anybody else? Let's click on Tanner and see if there's anybody else that looks like him. Let's see. All the same people that we were normally looking at. Yeah, really none of them for me. I mean, maybe Lewis. And I think he's the one I said last week, Lewis as well. Maybe. But I don't know. Tanner, for me, seems like the most Rowan, at least in the first book. I'm going to vote for both of them. Did I vote for Citra? I didn't vote for her last time. So I'm going to go ahead and vote for the 3 that I picked, because I liked them a lot. Okay. We're just going to ignore this third one. Just going to pretend like it's not there, and we'll come back to it later. Scythe Faraday. Okay, so no, I'm not going to vote for Liam Neeson on this one, but it's all the same people from last time. So, I'm gonna take Pierce Brosnan's picture. Because I feel like he was one of the top actors. But what about this guy that I said last time? Not Colin Farrell. There we go. I'm going to add him. Because I feel like it's not the best picture of him, in my opinion, but I feel like he's a little bit more, it's really not a good picture. Ugh. What a horrible picture. Can we find a better picture? I think we found one last time. A way better picture than this. That just looks so bad. This looks like such a bad picture of him. Like a picture that looks like Scythe Faraday. This is a good one. That is a good one. And we're gonna upload it. Oh, well, if you knew that there were better pictures, then why would you? Okay, well, whatever, not a big deal. Not a big deal. Perfect. That's a way better picture. That's a way better picture than the one they had. Okay, and we're gonna save that picture as well. Okay. Okay, so, oops. Okay, let's go back. Okay. Personally, I disagree with this. We'll come back to this for sure. We'll come back to these characters that we haven't quite heard about yet. But I do want to look at Tiger's character because we have met Tiger. Oh my gosh, Eduardo Franco from Stranger Things. He would be perfect except for the fact that he is, I feel, more of a like laid back personality. I feel like Tiger's got to be a little bit more, but you know, it's a tough one. I don't know who that is. He looks a little too serious in my opinion. I'm going to vote for Eduardo Franco just because I like him as an actor. But he does really look like Tiger, I feel like. He's got really more of like the look, like the like party boy look. Those are the only two. There's gotta be a better person for Tiger. Maybe like someone who looks like a young Eddie Redmayne, I feel like would be good. I'm trying to think of the like people, actors, young actors' names. I don't know a lot of young actors. I guess there's not a lot of suggestions here. Is there? Okay, let's see if there are actors who are supposed to look like this guy. Similar actors include, Zolo Mariduena. Okay, could definitely see this kid as Tiger, right? Oh yeah, he's got like the little glint in his eye. Definitely think so. Asher Angel. He looks like he would be good. Okay, can I go back and suggest these? How do I do that? Okay, do I just copy his name? Do I just copy and paste his name? I think that's what I do. Okay, come on, website. There we go. Okay, we go back to Tiger. Look, Eduardo's already number one. Okay, we're gonna search that guy and we're gonna put him in there because I really like him. I like his vibes. He looks definitely like a tiger, at least for this story. Okay, and then there was let's look. There were other actors that looked like him that I would have been like, yes. Dang it. Okay, I'm gonna have to go all the way back. This kid. Asher Angel, that's the guy. Should have remembered that. That's an easy one to remember. His name's alliterative. Wonder if his name is real. You know? Seems like it's not a real name. But it could be. It totally could be. Okay, let's go down to... Where did Tiger go? Hello? Okay. And we're going to add in Asher Angel. And I need to get these people's pictures. Nope, didn't mean to do that. Save. 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 Okay. Yeah, I think we'll make a collage with all of these, but to be honest with you, that may be more time than I have. That may be requiring me to take up a little bit more time on stream than I actually have. So maybe we'll do it next time, next stream. Okay, so we had Citra, which I really love, and Rowan, both of them I really like. Yeah, Tiger's going to be a toss-up. I feel like it's going to be really hard to figure out Tiger. And then Scythe Faraday, of course, we're going to have, there's a couple. I feel like Colin Ferguson is going to be my go-to, but Pierce Brosnan works for me too. And then as we keep reading, we're going to try to fill in the rest of these. I honestly can't remember some of these characters. Don't remember them in the book even, so that's kind of interesting. But we are going to learn about some of these other characters, and we'll be able to cast them. I'm not sure if I entirely agree with this actress in Scythe Curie's position, but we'll see. We'll see what everybody thinks. I think I'm going to pick somebody else, personally. Okay, so let's get into reading. I got to fix this. So we're just going to ignore this real quick. Let me fix this. We want to interact. We're going to go back. Okay, perfect. Okay. So yeah, we're finishing up chapter 2 today, or not chapter 2, part 2 today, to try and get as far as we can in this book. We've only got about 70, 60 pages left, which we can, I think, definitely get done in the rest of the time that we have on stream. We've got our summary up on the screen if you need to reference it. We've also got some vocabulary words. Why does this keep doing this? Please go away. Thank you. We've also got some vocabulary words on the screen. Obsequious, sycophant, and incendiary. We talked about them in the last video, so go check that out. If you haven't read at least the first part and a couple pages of the second part of this book, please go back, watch the other 2 videos that I streamed reading the first 2 parts, or go out and buy this book for yourself. It's Scythe by Neal Shusterman. It's an awesome book. It's super intense. It's very exciting, but also like about a lot of really tough topics, philosophically tough topics. You know, nobody can die in this world. So it leads to a lot of questions of like, who should die? Who should we put in charge of making that decision? And are those people worthy of that position? Are they going to carry out their task in a ethical, moral way? Or are they going to be corrupt and possibly take lives, and like it and enjoy it? So we'll see. We've just gotten into the second part, and it's getting really good. There's lots of interesting stuff that we've been reading about. So we're just going to continue on. As each chapter begins, we get a journal entry at the front, which is slightly formatted differently to indicate that it is a journal entry. And not only that, but it is written in the first person perspective. So we do get kind of a first person story from these journal entries. And then the rest of the book is third person omniscient, or no, third person limited, depending on which character we're looking at, either Citra, Rowan, or even sometimes random characters that come into the story. You know who I didn't see on the fan cast? I just thought about this. I didn't see Esme. I didn't see Esme on here. Maybe because it's so hard to find like child actresses, but I don't see Esme on here. That's crazy. Okay, so we need to add a new role then. I'm going to put Esme. She only has one name in the book. We're going to add her role. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited I get to do this. Okay, so now I have to look for somebody to be Esme. I don't know too many child actresses right now. I feel like I would need to do some research to figure out who would be a good Esme. Like thinking about the TV shows I watch and stuff. I don't like know a lot of children in those TV shows, unfortunately. Okay, well, we can do this though. I think, well, I don't think it really tells us about Esme's picture or Esme's her description. But she's going to appear again. So we'll come back here when we get maybe another character looking at Esme and seeing what she looks like, and then we'll add this stuff in if we get to that part today. Hopefully we do. I think we will, because that's really cool. Oh, and I got to get a soundtrack going because I did have some helpers over here at my house yesterday. Over this weekend, actually, and they did help me make some sound effects, so I'm hoping that they play for you. I'm very excited about them. So we have a good old cheer. Oh, maybe it's not gonna go. No, here it goes. It's a little delayed. And then we have for moments of shock. For sweet moments.
Aww.
For thinking moments.
Hmm.
And then we just have another applause. I have to get... Yes. Thank you. So thank you, my helpers who were here this weekend. Shout out to Jim Bob and all of my great helpers who helped me pick out these sounds. I do want to get like a laugh track though. That's the one thing I forgot about when they were here that I should put on was a laugh track. So I might get the laugh track coming next stream. Okay, so let's we're getting into part 2. We've been doing some of the sound effects like music. Okay, here we go. This might be good.
Feels
No.
weird.
That is not the sound I wanted. Okay, here we go. I think that should be pretty good. Turn it down for me. Ambiance. This is relaxing music and ambiance from Skyrim. So should be, there should not be any problem with the copyright. Yeah, I think this is perfect. Okay. All right, starting in chapter 2, we're on page 111. We're taking a look at the journal entry, another journal entry. We are not the same beings we once were. Consider our inability to grasp literature and most entertainment from the mortal age. To us, the things that stirred mortal emotions are incomprehensible. Only stories of love pass through our post-mortal filter. Yet even then, we are baffled by the intensity of longing and loss that threatens those mortal tales of love. We could blame it on our emo nanites, limiting our despair, but it runs far deeper than that. Mortals fantasize that love was eternal and its loss unimaginable. Now we know that neither is true. Love remained mortal, while we became eternal. Only scythes can equalize that. But everyone knows the chance of being gleaned in this, or even the next millennium, is so low as to be ignored. We are not the same beings we once were. So then, if we are no longer human, what are we? From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. Chapter 11. Indiscretions. Citra and Rowan were not always together at gleanings. Sometimes Scythe Faraday took just one of them. The worst gleaning Citra witnessed took place in early May, just a week before Vernal Conclave. The first of 3 conclaves she and Rowan would attend during their apprenticeship. Their quarry was a man who had just turned the corner and reset his age to 24. He was at home having dinner with his wife and 2 kids, who seemed to be around Citra's age. When Scythe Faraday announced who they had come for, the family wept, and the man slipped off into a bedroom. Scythe Faraday had chosen a peaceful bloodletting for the man, but that was not what happened. When Citra and the Scythe entered the room, he ambushed them. The man was in peak condition, and in the arrogance of his new rejuvenation, he rejected his gleaning and fought the Scythe, breaking his jaw with a vicious punch. Citra came to his aid, trying some Bakator moves she had learned from Scythe Yingxing, and quickly learned that applying a martial art is much different than from practice in a dojo. The man swatted her away and advanced on Faraday, who was still reeling from his injury. Citra leaped on him again, clinging to him, for the moment giving up on anything beyond eye gouging and hair pulling. It distracted him just long enough for Scythe Faraday to pull out a hunting knife he had concealed in his robe and slit the man's throat. He began gasping for air, his hands to his neck trying futilely to hold back the flow of blood, and Scythe Faraday holding a knife to his own swelling jaw. And Scythe Faraday, holding a hand to his own swelling jaw, spoke to him, not with malice, but with great sorrow. "Do you understand the consequences of what you've done?" The man could not answer. He fell to the ground, quivering, gasping. Citra thought death from such a wound would be instantaneous, but apparently not. She had never seen so much blood. "Stay here," the Scythe told her. "Look upon him kindly and be the last thing he sees." Well, that's kind of nice, right? I mean, something we need to go back to. In the previous stream we read about the Scythe rules, which is kind of like the title of this part, No Laws Beyond These. And one of the laws is that if a person doesn't accept their gleaning, if a Scythe comes to them and is like, "I'm here to kill you," then that person should welcome it, basically. And if they don't, if they fight against this gleaning, then not only they will die, but their whole family will die as well. So Citra, if she remembers the rule, Citra probably knows that Scythe Faraday is going to go kill this man's family because he tried to resist Scythe Faraday. And so that's why he says that. Do you know the consequences of what you've done? Do you understand the consequences of what you've done? Because that's it. That's the consequences. Your family dies. But it is interesting that Scythe Faraday says, "Look kindly on him and be the last thing he sees." So, I mean, he's a nice guy. Then he left the room. Citra knew what he was going to do. The law was very clear as to the consequences of running or resisting one's gleaning. She couldn't close her eyes because she was instructed not to, but if there was a way, she wished she could have closed her ears because she knew what she was about to hear from the living room. It began with the pleas from the woman begging for their lives of her children and the children sobbing in despair. "Do not beg," Citra heard the Scythe say sharply. "Show these children more courage than your husband did." Citra kept her gaze fixed on the dying man's until his eyes finally emptied of life. Then she went to join Scythe Faraday, steeling herself for what was to come. The 2 children were on the sofa, their sobs having degraded into tearful whimpers. The woman was on her knees, whispering to them, comforting them. "Are you quite done?" the Scythe said impatiently. At last the woman rose. Her eyes were tearful, but they no longer seemed pleading. "Do what you have to do," she said. "Good," said the Scythe. "I applaud your fortitude. Now, as it happens, your husband did not resist his gleaning." Then he touched his swelling face. "However, my apprentice and I had an altercation, resulting in these wounds." The woman just stared at him, her jaw slightly unhinged. So was Citra's. The Scythe turned to Citra and glared at her. "My apprentice shall be severely disciplined for fighting with me." Then he turned back to the woman. "Please kneel." The woman fell to her knees, not so much a kneel as a collapse. Scythe Faraday held out his ring to her. As is customary, you and your children shall receive immunity from gleaning for 1 year henceforth. Each of you, please kiss my ring." So he's granted them immunity. The woman kissed it again and again and again. So, real thinking moment. Wonder why he did that, because he knows the law is to, like, kill the man's family. And he makes a show of saying to the woman, "No, that's not what happened. I had an altercation with my apprentice, and that's how I sustained these injuries." So it's really interesting that he's chosen to forego the law, so to speak, kind of like work around this law so that he doesn't have to kill this man's family. Okay. So let's see what happens. Let's see if Citra asks him about this. Let's see if they figure it out. The Scythe said little after they left. They rode a bus because whenever possible, the Scythe avoided the use of a public car. He saw it as an extravagance. When they got off at their stop, Citra dared to speak. "Shall I be disciplined for breaking your jaw?" Citra knew it would be healed by morning, but the healing nanites were not spontaneous. He still looked pretty awful. "You will speak to no one of this," he told her sternly. "You will not even comment on it in your journal. Is that clear? The man's indiscretion shall never be known." "Yes, Your Honor." She wanted to tell him how much she admired him for what he had done, choosing compassion over obligation. There was a lesson to be learned in every gleaning, and today's was one she would not soon forget. The sanctity of the law and the wisdom to know when it must be broken. That's a good one. That's a good one. That's really interesting, and I think it's going to speak a lot to...
Hey everybody, my name's Mark, and I'm the warehouse
Hello.
manager at Medieval Collectibles.
No way.
Today, we wanted to give you a short tour through our warehouse.
So I keep getting these ads for like axes and maces now that I looked up a mace on that one website. Oh well. Oh well. It's still kind of funny. Anyway, so that is really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see, because Rowan wasn't there for that gleaning. That's, I think, a really good distinction that Citra was. So Citra saw him kind of like break the rules, because that's what he's done, right? Like, he's broken the rules. He's broken one of the big Scythe rules. But I think that in this particular case, he breaks it because he's trying to show compassion, like Citra says. But I think this is also important to know because there are going to be Scythes that break the rules not out of passion, but out of selfishness and other reasons. So that is pretty interesting. It is very, like, I didn't realize that that particular scene, especially with Citra being there, is very important. Citra, try as she might to be a stellar apprentice, was not immune to indiscretion herself. One of Citra's nightly chores was to bring Scythe Faraday a glass of warm milk before bed. I love this part. I'm so excited. As in my childhood, warm milk smooths the edges of the day, the Scythe had told her. I have, however, dispensed with the cookie that once came with it. The thought of a Scythe having milk and cookies before bed bordered on absurd to Citra, but she supposed even an agent of death would have guilty pleasures. Quite often, however, when a gleaning had been difficult, he would fall asleep before she came into his room at the appointed time with the milk. In those cases, she would drink it herself or give it to Rowan because Scythe Faraday made it clear that nothing in his household was ever wasted. On the night of that awful gleaning, she lingered in his room a bit longer. "Scythe Faraday?" she said gently, then said it again. No response. She could tell by his breathing he was out. There was an object on the nightstand. In fact, it was there every night. His ring. It caught the oblique light spilling in from the hallway. Even in the dim room, it glittered. She downed the glass of milk and set it on the nightstand so that in the morning the Scythe would see she had brought it and that it hadn't been wasted. Then she knelt there, her eyes fixed on the ring. She wondered why she never slept with it, but felt that asking would be some sort of intrusion. She wondered why he never slept with it, but it felt like it would be an intrusion. When she received hers, if she received hers, would it retain the solemn mystery that it held for her now, or would it become ordinary to her? Would she come to take it for granted? She reached forward, then drew her hand back, then reached forward again and gently took the ring. That deserves a... She turned it in her fingers so that it caught the light. The stone was big, about the size of an acorn. It was said to be a diamond, but there was a darkness in its core that made it different from a simple diamond ring. There was something in the core of that ring that no one knew what it was. She wondered if even the Scythes themselves knew. The center wasn't exactly black. It was a deep discoloration that looked different depending on the light, the way a person's eyes sometimes do. Then, maybe it's an eyeball. Maybe there's an eyeball inside. I don't know. Just made that up. Then when she glanced at the Scythe, she could see that his eyes were open and watching her. She froze, knowing she was caught, knowing that putting the ring down now wouldn't change that. Would you like to try it on? Scythe Faraday asked. No, she said. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have touched it. You shouldn't have, but you did. She wondered if he had been awake this whole time. Go ahead, he told her. Try it on. I insist. She was dubious, but did as she was told, because in spite of what she told him, she did want to try it on. Dubious. Dubious is a vocabulary word. Dubious. What does dubious mean? Dubious means, I'm pretty sure, like, you're suspicious, but like in a playful way. Okay, no, never mind. Hesitating or doubting. So hesitating or doubting is what dubious means. She's like not sure. It's like when you're it's like when your parents are like, "Oh, I've got a gift for you." And you're like, "Do they really? Or is this like a trick? Are they going to make me do chores or something, you know?" Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead and refresh. There we go. Okay, dubious. It's now on the vocab list. Okay, so he's getting her to try it on. But she did want to try it on. It felt warm on her finger. It was sized for the Scythe, so it was too large for her. It was also heavier than she imagined. Do you worry that it will ever be stolen? She asked. Not really. Anyone foolish enough to steal a Scythe's ring is quickly removed from the world, so they cease to be a problem. I love that this happens. Just love it. So it ceased to be a problem. I lost my place. The ring was getting noticeably cooler. It's a covetable object, though, don't you agree? The Scythe said. Suddenly, Citra realized the ring wasn't just cool, it was freezing. The metal in a matter of seconds had grown white with frost, and her finger was in such intense pain from the cold she cried out and pulled the ring from her hand. It flew across the room. Not only was her ring finger severely frostbitten, so were the fingers that had pulled it free. She bit back a whimper. She could now feel warmth flowing through her body as her healing nanites released morphine. She became woozy, but forced herself to stay alert. A security measure I installed myself, the Scythe said. A microcoolant chip in the setting. Let me see. He turned on his nightstand light and grabbed her hand, looking at her ring finger. The flesh at the joint was pale blue and frozen solid. In the age of mortality, you might have lost that finger, but I trust your nanites are already mending the damage. He let go of her hand. You'll be fine by morning. Perhaps next time you'll think before touching things that don't belong to you. He retrieved his ring, set it back on the nightstand, then handed her the empty glass. From now on, Rowan will bring me my evening milk, he said. Do we get an awe? Aww. That's really sad for Citra. That's not a happy awe, it's a sad awe, right? Poor Citra. Citra deflated. I'm sorry I disappointed you, Your Honor. You're right, I don't deserve to bring you your milk. He raised an eyebrow. You misunderstand. This is not a punishment. Curiosity is human. I merely allowed you to get it out of your system. I have to say, it took you long enough. Then he gave her a little conspiratorial grin. Now, let's see how long it takes Rowan to go for the ring. Okay, so that's cute. I think that if at this point in the book, if I were Citra, or not if I were Citra, but like looking at it from an outsider's perspective, Citra seems kind of like Scythe Faraday's favorite right now. I feel like, I feel like we haven't seen enough of the Faraday-Rowan relationship yet to know, but it kind of feels like Faraday is Citra's. Citrus is Faraday's favorite. All right, that was the end of chapter 11. We're moving on. We've got another journal entry to read. Sometimes, when the weight of my job becomes overwhelming, I begin to lament all the things lost when we conquered death. I think about religion and how once we became our own saviors, our own gods, most faiths became irrelevant. What must it have been like to believe in something greater than oneself? To accept imperfection and look into a rising vision of all we could ever be? It must have been comforting. It must have been frightening. It must have lifted people from the mundane, but also justified all sorts of evil. I wonder if the bright benefit of belief outweighed the darkness its abuse could bring. There are the tone cults, of course, dressing in sackcloth and worshiping sonic vibrations, but like so many things in our world, they seek to imitate what once was. Their rituals are not to be taken seriously. They exist merely to make the passing time feel meaningful and profound. So in this world, there is no religion, right? So that cuts out the need for squabbling over what one believes. But there is still like a sort of religion group, a religious group, and they call them cults. They call them tone cults because they worship the vibrations of sounds, right? And this journal entry is making a point to say, they're kind of just imitating religion of old. It's not like they can believe in a real God, right? Their rituals are just kind of there for show, just to pass the time. So it is interesting, and we're gonna see and interact more with the tone cults in this book. Okay. Lately, I've been preoccupied with a tone cult in my neighborhood. I went into their gathering space the other day. I was there to glean one of the cult's congregants, a man who had not yet turned his first corner. They were intoning what they called the resonant frequency of the universe. One of them told me that the sound is alive and that harmonizing with it brings inner peace. I wonder, when they look at the great tuning fork that stands as the symbol of their faith, if they truly believe it to be a symbol of power, or are they just joining in a communal joke? From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. Okay, so most of the journal entries that have started the chapters kind of had stuff to do with like what happens in the chapter. So I think in this chapter we're going to hear a little bit more about tone cults, or this is setting us up for later. Not sure, but we'll see. Chapter 12. No room for mediocrity. Mediocrity. Is that a vocab word? It feels like a vocab word. It feels like a vocab word. Mediocrity means like almost average, like little bit under average. It's mediocre. It's barely passing, right? It's ordinary. So mediocrity would be the adjective form of mediocre, right? Like if someone were to say you're mediocre, they do mean it in an insulting way. So did I spell that right? I didn't spell that right. Mediocrity. Mediocrity is average. It's barely average. You're barely passing if you're mediocre. So mediocrity is the adjective form of that, right? Yeah. In a sentence. No room for mediocrity. Let me try to think of a sentence that would work. Mediocrity. Don't strive for mediocrity. Yeah, I guess that's the best sentence I could come up with for that. Yeah, but it's an insult. It's like it's to be lower than or less than or not good or barely okay, barely. And that's the title of this chapter. No room for mediocrity. The Scythedom is the world's only self-governing body, said Scythe Faraday. While the rest of the world is under Thunderhead rule, the Scythedom is not, which is why we hold conclaves 3 times a year to resolve disputes, review policy, and mourn the lives we've taken. Vernal Conclave, which was to take place during the first week of May, was less than a week away. So vernal, I think, comes from the Spanish word for fall. I'm pretty sure. So like vernal, maybe? I don't want to. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I feel very spring. It's the opposite of fall. It's spring. Yeah, vernal, spring. So this is the spring conclave. So if we were actually looking at a calendar, if they actually used calendars, this would be in March, April, May, possibly. Vernal conclave, which was to take place during the first week of May. Oh, I could just have reading comprehension, and then I would know. And then I would know that vernal was spring, and it's in May. Okay, moving right along. Rowan and Citra had studied enough of the structure of the Scythedom to know that all 25 regions of the world held their conclaves on the same day, and that there were currently 321 Scythes in their region, which encompassed the heart of the North American continent. And it is North American, not North American, North American continent. The Mid-American Conclave is an important one, Scythe Faraday told them, because we tend to set the trend for much of the world. There's an expression, as goes Mid-America, so goes the planet. The Grand Slayer Scythes of the global conclave always have their eyes on us. Scythe Faraday explained that each conclave they would be tested. I do not know the nature of this first test, which is why you need to be as prepared as possible in all aspects of your training. Rowan found he had a million questions about conclave, but kept them to himself. He let Citra do all the asking, mainly because the questions irritated Scythe Faraday and he never answered them. You found out all you need to know when you get there, the Scythe told them. For now, all your attention must be on your training and your studies. Rowan had never been an exceptional student, but that was by design. To be either too good or too bad drew attention. As much as he hated being the lettuce, it was his comfort zone. If you apply yourself, I have no doubt you could be at the top of your class, his science teacher had told him after getting the highest grade on his midterm last year. He had done it just to see if he could. Now that he knew, he saw no great need to do it again. There were many reasons, not the least of which was his own ignorance about scythes in those days before his apprenticeship. He assumed that being a stellar student would make him a target. Supposedly, a friend of a friend was gleaned at 11 because he was the smartest kid in 5th grade. It was nothing more than an urban myth, but Rowan believed it just enough that it kept him from wanting to stand out. He wondered if other kids held back for fear of being gleaned. Oh my gosh, that's so awful. That's so awful. Imagine, oh, I get straight A's. Well, you're gonna die because you have straight A's. That's horrifying. Also, yeah, also, that's it. There's nothing. It sounds horrible. Yeah, I can see why a lot of kids wouldn't want to be trying very hard because of that. He had little experience with being so studious. He found it exhausting. And there was more than just poison chemistry, post-mortal history, and journaling. There was metallurgy, as it applies to weapons. Oh, I think that means like the something to do with metal. I'm just gonna say it has something to do with metal. Metallurgy. Metallurgy. The branch of science and technology concerned with the properties of metals and their production and purification. Metallurgy. What a great word. We're adding it to the vocab list. Oops. Metallurgy. We'll go back one. Metallurgy. That's kind of fun. So it's like studying how to, how to make metal, or how to or how to work with it, how to melt it so you can turn it into a blade, right? Okay. Metallurgy. That's a new one for me. Metallurgy as it applies to weapons, the philosophy of mortality, the psychology of immortality, the literature of Scythedom, from poetry to the wisdom found in famous Scythe's journals, and of course the mathematical statistics that Scythe Faraday relied upon so heavily. There was no room for mediocrity, and look at that. That is the title of the chapter. Especially now with Conclave coming up. Rowan did ask him one question about Conclave. Will we be disqualified if we fail the test? Faraday took a moment before answering. No, he told them, but there is a consequence. Although he would not tell them what that consequence was. Rowan concluded that not knowing was more terrifying than knowing. With just a few days before Conclave, he and Citra stayed up late studying in the weapons den. Rowan found himself dozing, but was quickly awakened when Citra slammed a book. I hate this, she announced. Cerberin I'm gonna have a tough one. Okay, so Cerberin, aconite, conium, polonium. The poisons are all running together in my head. That would sure make a person die faster, Rowan said with a smirk. She crossed her arms. Do you know your poisons? We're only supposed to know 40 by Conclave, he pointed out. And do you know them? I will, he told her. What's the molecular formula for tetrodotoxin? No, tetrodotoxin. These are all like chemicals, by the way. I'm not going to put them on the vocab words list because they're science names. They're terms of chemicals. So, yeah. If you want to create a science list of chemicals to look up, then go find them in this book. Okay. He wanted to ignore her, but found he couldn't back away from the challenge. Perhaps a bit of her competitive nature was rubbing off on him. C11, H17, N306. Wrong, she said, pointing a finger at him. It's 08, not 06. You fail. She was trying to rile him up, so she wouldn't be the only one riled. He wasn't going to oblige. Guess so, he said, and tried to return to his studies. Aren't you the least bit worried? He took a breath and closed his book. When Faraday first began teaching them, Rowan found the use of actual old-school books very off-putting, but over time, he learned there was something very satisfying to turning the pages. So true. And as Citra had already discovered, the emotional catharsis of slamming a book shut. So true. Of course I'm worried, but here's the way I look at it. We know they won't disqualify us, and we already know we can't be gleaned. We'll have 2 more chances to make up for any screw-ups before one of us is chosen. Whatever the consequence of failing the first round of tests, if either of us fail, we'll deal with it. Citra slumped in her chair. I don't fail, she said, but didn't sound too convinced of it. There was this pouty look on her face that made Rowan want to smile, but he didn't because he knew that would infuriate her. He actually liked it how she would get infuriated, but they had too much to work to do to indulge in emotional distraction. Rowan put away his toxicology book and pulled out his volume of weapons identification. They were required to be able to identify 30 different weapons, how to wield them, and their detailed history. Rowan was more worried about that than the poisons. He spared a glance at Citra, who noticed the glance, so he tried not to look at her again. Then out of nowhere, she said, I would miss you. He looked up, and she looked away. How do you mean? I mean that if disqualification was part of the rules, I'd miss having you around.
Aww.
Let's just make that a little bit louder, because that was really sweet.
Aww.
Aww. He considered reaching out to take her hand, which rested gently on the table. But the table was big, and her hand was too far away for it to be anything other than insanely awkward. Then again, even if they sat closer, it would be an insane thing to do. But it's not part of the rules, he said, which means that no matter what, you're stuck with me for 8 more months. She grinned. Yeah, I'm sure I'll really be sick of you by then. It was the first time it occurred to Rowan that she might not hate him as much as she thought she did.
Aww.
It's breaking my heart. It's breaking my heart, Rowan and Citra. Literally. It's breaking. Okay, that was the end of chapter 12. Moving on to chapter 13. How much further we got? We've got a long way to go, but we've got a lot of time to go before we get there. So, and we haven't been introduced to any new characters yet. And I'm kind of like getting antsy. Like I want to meet these other characters already. Are we going to meet them? Yes, we are going to meet them in this part. So we'll get there. Okay, this is the next chapter, starting a new journal entry. And I guess the last journal entry didn't really set up that chapter, right? Because we heard about the tone cults in the journal entry, and the chapter really wasn't about that. It was really more about getting ready for the conclave, Citra and Rowan getting ready for the conclave. So we'll see if anything else pops up about that or about from these journal entries if they connect at all. It doesn't really seem like they do. It just kind of seems like they're giving us more background information now. But we'll see. The quota system has worked for over 200 years, and although it fluctuates region to region, it makes it crystal clear that each Scythe's responsibility to the world is, of course, it's all based on averages. We can go days or even weeks without gleaning, but we must meet our quota before the next conclave. There are those eager ones who glean early and find themselves with little to do as conclave draws near. There are those who procrastinate and have to hurry toward the end, but those approaches lead to sloppiness and unintentional bias. I often wonder if the quota will ever change, and if so, how much? Population growth is still off the charts, but it's balanced by the Thunderhead's ability to provide for an ever-increasing population, renewable resources, subsurface dwellings, artificial islands, and all without there ever being any less green or a sense of overcrowding. We have mastered this world, and yet protected it in a way that our forefathers could scarcely have dreamed. But all the things are limited. While the Thunderhead does not interfere with Scythedom, it does suggest the number of scythes there should be in the world. Currently, there are approximately 5 million people gleaned per year worldwide, a tiny fraction of the death rate in the age of mortality, and nowhere near enough to balance population growth. I shudder to think how many more scythes it would take and how many gleanings would be required if we ever need to curb population growth altogether. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. Chapter 13, Vernal Conclave, the springtime conclave that's happening in May. Chapter 13, Vernal Conclave. Fulcrum City was a post-mortal metropolis toward the very center of mid-America. There by the river, set low between the sky-soaring spires of graceful city living, was a venerable structure of stone, impressive if not in height then in solidity. Marble columns and arches supported a great copper dome. It was an unyielding homage to ancient Greece and imperial Rome, the birthing grounds of civilization. It was still called the Capitol Building, for it was once a state capital, back when there were still states, in those days before government became obsolete. Now it had the honor of holding the administrative offices of Mid-America's Scythedom, as well as hosting its conclave 3 times a year. So I guess we can assume that Fulcrum City, very center, post-mortal trust, very center of Mid-America. So it can't be Washington, D.C. It could be, I don't think it's the Capitol building that they are at. It could be. But I feel like if it was toward the very center of Mid-America, it would be like more at the center between all of the North American countries, I think. Or, no, I feel like it would still be it still would be in the center of like the American country, right? Because if Mid-America is the middle part of the Americas, right? Then maybe, I don't know. I don't know if he's like trying to say that it's Washington, D.C. and they're at the Capitol building, or if he's just saying it's a Capitol building. It's like a Capitol building from another state, another capital city. Could be. I don't think we're supposed to know. I don't think we're supposed to be able to, like, pinpoint it. It was pouring rain the day of the vernal conclave. Citra rarely minded the rain, but a day of gloom coupled with a day of pure tension did not sit well with her. But then, a bright sunny day would feel mocking. Citra realized there was no good day to be presented to an intimidating elegy of Scythes. Fulcrum City was only an hour away by hypertrain, but of course Scythe Faraday saw hypertrains as an unnecessary extravagance. Besides, I want scenery rather than a windowless subterranean tunnel. I'm a human being, not a mole. A standard train took 6 hours, and Citra did enjoy the scenery along the way, although she spent most of the trip studying. Fulcrum City was on the Mississippi River. Yeah. So this is gonna be somewhere in, like, the Midwest, right? I don't remember my geography that well. Do I need to look up a map? I think I need to look up a map. A map of the United States. Okay. So, can we go here? Can you show me this? The Mississippi River is, okay, wait. I'd like to be on a map. Okay, let's take a look. It's not a big picture. Okay, so yeah, it goes to the left of Mississippi. So, yeah, so I feel like it's got to be one of the capitals. Maybe it could be like, this is on the Mississippi River though, right? Yeah, Fulcrum City is on the Mississippi River. So maybe it's like here, toward the center of Mid-America. I feel like somewhere either in, what are these states called? Arkansas. No, Arkansas is too low. Missouri or Iowa. I feel like it's in Missouri. So Fulcrum City, maybe Minneapolis. Maybe I am supposed to know. Maybe we are supposed to know. Maybe I'm missing the reference. That's a big possibility. I could be missing the reference. So I think maybe Minneapolis is where it's located. She recalled that there was once a giant silver arch on the okay, so is it St. Louis? Wait a minute. Giant silver arch on the riverbank, but it was gone now. Destroyed back in the Age of Mortality by something called terrorism. She'd have learned more about the city if she weren't so focused on her poisons and weapons. So I feel like we are supposed to know where they are. I'm pretty sure the big arch. Is that in? I thought that was in St. Louis. Isn't the big arch in St. Louis? Pretty sure. Yes, I am looking this up. Yes, you can watch me look it up. Yeah, the Gateway Arch. So it's in Missouri. Okay. So it's not Minneapolis. It's St. Louis. They're in St. Louis. Why did I say Minneapolis? That's in Minnesota. You know, believe it or not, at one point in my life, I was really good at geography. I'm sure that, you know, you're just going to have to take my word for it, because no one would believe me now. Yeah. Minneapolis is in Minnesota. Could have had a V8. Yeah. Okay, so they're in St. Louis. Confirmed. They are in St. Louis. Okay. That's like the second time this stream that I've totally messed something up. Okay. I'm gonna drink a little bit more water. I'll drink a little bit more water. And we will try to get this right next time. So yeah, St. Louis. They had arrived the evening before Conclave and stayed in a downtown hotel. Morning came much too quickly. As Citra, Rowan, and Scythe Faraday walked from their hotel at the awful hour of 6:30 a.m., people in the streets ran to them and handed them umbrellas, choosing to get wet rather than see a Scythe and his apprentices go without one. "Do they know you've taken 2 apprentices instead of just 1?" Citra asked. Of course they know, said Rowan. Why wouldn't they? But Scythe Faraday's silence on the matter was a clear red flag to Citra. You did clear it with the high blade, didn't you, Scythe Faraday? I have found that the Scythedom is better to ask forgiveness than permission, he told them. If you don't know the phrase, better to ask forgiveness than permission, it basically means that it's better to just go ahead and do something that maybe not the right thing and then say sorry instead of asking for permission and being told not to do it. It's a pretty common phrase, like especially in business, and in certain situations where you don't want to just go ask your boss or go ask somebody to do it, right? But it probably isn't the best plan if you're going to see a bunch of Scythes and haven't told them that you've taken 2 apprentices and are competing them against each other to get the Scythe ring. Some people might have problems with that. Citra gave Rowan an I told you so look, and he cocked his umbrella slightly so he didn't have to see it. It will not be a problem, Scythe Faraday said, but he didn't sound very convincing. Citra looked to Rowan again, who was no longer eclipsed by his umbrella. Am I the only one who's worried about that? Rowan shrugged. We have immunity until Winter Conclave, and it can't be revoked. Everyone knows that. What's the worst they could do? Foreshadowing. Right there on page 127. A big old pot of foreshadowing. What's the worst they could do? Rowan says. I don't know, Rowan. You could be killed after your Winter Conclave, after immunity is up. That's the worst thing that could happen, I'm pretty sure. Some Scythes arrived at the Capitol building on foot, as they had, others in public cars, some in private cars, and several in limousines. There were ropes to hold back spectators on either side of the wide marble staircase leading up to the building, as well as peace officers and members of the Blade Guard, the Scythedom's elite security force. The arriving Scythes were protected from their admiring, adoring public, even if the public was not protected from them. I despise running the gauntlet, Scythe Faraday said, referring to climbing the steps to Conclave. It's even worse when it's not raining. The crowd on either side is 12 people deep. Now, it was only half that. It never occurred to Citra that people would come out to see the Scythes arriving at Conclave, but then all celebrity events drew onlookers, so why not a gathering of Scythes? Some of the arriving Scythes gave obligatory waves, others played to the crowd, kissing babies and randomly granting immunity. Citra and Rowan followed Faraday's lead, which was to ignore the crowd completely. There were dozens of other Scythes in the entry vestibule. They removed their raincoats to reveal robes of all colors, all textures. It was a rainbow that summoned forth anything but thoughts of death. This, Citra realized, was intentional. Scythes wished to be seen as the many facets of light, not darkness. Through a grand arch lay a grander chamber beneath the central dome, a rotunda where hundreds of Scythes greeted one another, engaging in casual conversation around elaborate breakfast spread in the center. Citra wondered what it was that Scythes talked about. The tools of gleaning, the weather, the chafing of their robes. It was intimidating enough to be in the presence of a single Scythe. To be surrounded by hundreds was enough to make one crumble. Scythe Faraday leaned over and spoke to them in a hushed voice. See there? He pointed to a bald, heavily bearded man. Bald, heavily bearded man. Thinking Jeff Bridges vibes. Scythe Archimedes, one of the world's oldest living Scythes. He'll tell you he was there in the year of the Condor, when the Scythedom was first formed, but it's a lie. He's not that old. And over there, he pointed to a woman with long silver hair in a pale lavender robe. That's Scythe Curie. Citra gasped. The Grande Dame of Death? So they say. Is it true she gleaned the last president before the Thunderhead was given control? Citra asked. And his cabinet, yes. He looked at her, perhaps a bit wistfully, Citra thought. Her actions were quite controversial back in the day. The woman caught them glancing her way and turned to them. Citra chilled when her piercing gray eyes zeroed in on her. Then the woman smiled at the three of them, nodded, and turned to her conversation. Okay, so it says Scythe, long silver hair. And she's got to be, I feel like she's supposed to be the same age as Scythe Faraday. I feel like she's like, that's like the whole point. Okay, let's go back here. Scythe by Neal Shusterman. Let's go back. Okay. Scythe Curie. So here is the main. Oh, but Julianne Moore, especially from the Hunger Games picture. That's like a perfect picture. I'm definitely voting Julianne Moore for that one. I feel like Emma Thompson's got too much of like a laugh. Maybe. But though, you know, maybe actually. Okay, Julia Jones, I'm actually digging Julia Jones for this one. I feel like you have to get the perfect like mixture of like young-ish, I feel. Because like, you know, you have to think like they reset their age. So it's not totally crazy to have it be a person who's younger. I kind of like Julia Jones. I would have to see her with lighter colored hair, but I think I'm going to vote Julia Jones on that one. Definitely going to keep Julianne Moore. She looks a little scary in that picture, but I still really liked her as Coin in the Hunger Games. So I feel like I'm okay with that. Julia Jones is definitely giving me Scythe Curie vibes. You know, sounds weird, but every time I read the book, I'm gonna have to look this up. What show? Every time I read this book, I thought of this actress as Scythe Curie. Can we see some pictures of her? Can we see some pictures of her in The Witcher? Because she looked so good. Can we get some? Like, she looked like, I felt like Scythe Curie, like, yes, look at this. Like, the robes, like her robes like that totally look like, it gave me Scythe Curie vibes so much. Every time I read the book, I thought of this picture. I thought of this, her name is Mimi Wendy. I always imagine her as Scythe Curie, especially the way she's dressed in The Witcher. So I'm going to take this picture. No, that's too much. I kind of just like this picture. Can we do this? No, I want to get the robe in there because I feel like that's like a really important part of her character, especially what she looks like. So we're going to add her to the list here. Mimi. N-D-I. There we go. She is. She's 30? Can we change the picture? Choose a different photo. Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Where'd she go? Okay, Julianne Moore is showing a Scythe Curie now. I kind of don't like that. Someone needs to vote for somebody else. Yeah. Okay. Did I save all those pictures? I did. I'm going to save all those pictures for my casting board that I'm making. Okay. Back to, we just met Scythe Curie. So exciting. The Grande Dame of Death. She's very famous. I guess infamous is the right word. Citra knows who she is. I think Rowan must know who she is as well. And she's the person whose journals we've been reading this whole time. So we kind of gotten a little bit of a sneak peek into her brain and her way of thinking. And she's going to become a more important character as we continue on. She gleaned the last president. man, that's really a connection with Julianne Moore and Coin, right? Like, that's like same plot point and everything. There was a group of 4 or 5 Scythes closer to the assembly chamber entrance, the doors of which were still closed. They wore bright robes studded with gems. The center of their attention was a Scythe in royal blue, whose robe contained what appeared to be diamonds. So this is the Scythe we've been reading about in this chapter. He's the Scythe that is not good. He's kind of bad, right? He kind of likes killing a little too much. He puts people, when he gleans them, he kind of puts people in a very bad situation and kind of puts himself as like this godly figure. And we're going to get to see more of him and learn his name. He said something and the others laughed a little too heartily for it to be anything but sycophantic. Vocab word, one of our vocab words. Who's that? Citra asked. Scythe Faraday's expression took a turn towards sour. That, he said, not even trying to hide his distaste, is Scythe Goddard, and his company is best avoided. So no clue, obviously, that Scythe Faraday does not like Scythe Goddard because they are fundamentally, philosophically different. Scythe Faraday believes in compassion and caring for people even when he gleans them, and will break the rules to show compassion to humans. Whereas Scythe Goddard seems to take pleasure in bending the rules for his own pleasure, to make it more fun for him to glean and kill people. So fundamentally, diametrically opposed characters, Scythe Goddard and Scythe Faraday. Goddard, isn't he the master of mass gleanings? Rowan asked. Faraday looked at him a bit concerned. Where did you hear that? Rowan shrugged. I have a friend who's obsessed with that kind of stuff, and he hears things. Citra gasped, realizing she had heard of Goddard, not by name, just by deed, or more accurately, rumor, because there was never any official report. But like Rowan said, you hear things. Is he the one who gleaned an entire airplane? Why? Asked Faraday, giving her a cold, accusing eye. Does that impress you? Citra shook her head. No, the opposite. But she couldn't help but be a bit dazzled by the way the man's robes caught the light. Everyone was, which must have been his intent. And yet, his was not the most ostentatious robe on display. Moving through the crowd was a Scythe in a lavishly gilded robe. The man was so large, his robe seemed a bit like a golden tent. Who's the fat guy? Citra asked. He looks important, said Rowan. Indeed, said Scythe Faraday. The fat guy, as you call him, is the High Blade, the most powerful man in the mid-American Scythedom. He presides over Conclave. The High Blade worked the crowd like a great gaseous planet, bending space around it. He could have tweaked his nanites to eliminate at least some of his girth, but clearly he had chosen not to. The choice was a bold statement, and his size made him an imposing figure. When he saw Faraday, he excused himself from his current conversation and made his way toward them. Sounded like a notification. Okay. Cool. Sorry about that. So we've also met the High Blade, which, did we get a sneak peek of that in the casting thing? Let's look. The High Blade. High Blade. Yes. They don't say his name yet, though. We haven't heard his name yet. Okay, so when... Okay, he's going to. So I'm just gonna leave it here and you guys can see. I think you can probably already figure it out who's the High Blade out of these actors. Could have tweaked, but he didn't. When he saw Faraday, he excused himself from his current conversation and made his way toward them. Honorable Scythe Faraday, always a pleasure to see you. He used both his hands to grip Faraday's in what was meant to be a heartfelt greeting, but felt forced and artificial. Citra, Rowan, I'd like you to meet High Blade Xenocrates, Faraday said, then turned back to the large man. These are my new apprentices. He took a moment to appraise them. A double apprenticeship, he said jovially. I believe that's a first. Most scythes have trouble with just one. The better of the two shall receive my blessing for the ring. And the other, said the High Blade, will be sorely disappointed, I am sure. Then he moved on to greet other Scythes that were just now coming in from the rain. See, Rowan said, and you were worried. But to Citra, nothing about the man seemed sincere. So true. He's political. He's definitely a political figure. Okay, so Scythe Xenocrates. We only have 2 options? No. John Goodman is good. I agree. Yes, John Goodman is great. But I feel like there's gotta be a better option. I mean, John Goodman is great. I'm just saying, like, I feel like the guy could be younger. Oh, who's the guy who played Uncle Vernon in Harry Potter? I know his name. It's just not coming to my brain right away. Richard Griffiths. Can we look him up? He would be good. He would be really good. Can we... No, actually, I love that photo. I love that photo of Richard Griffiths for this, because I feel like Scythe Xenocrates is going to have white hair. He's going to have a beard, right? He's going to be obviously like almost like a Santa, but like a like a Pope Santa, you know? Like he's like a Pope. Who else? Let's see if there are other actors that are mentioned here. Actors who would pass. No, he's not alive anymore? Really? No, he's not alive anymore. That's so sad. Okay, well, this is my dream cast. They don't have to be alive. Okay, Alan Rickman, no. Christopher Lee, no. Okay, let's look at actors who have passed. You know, because why not? Oh my gosh, there's so many. Oh, sad. Oh, crying. Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yes, you got such strong vibes from Hunger Games. Who was he in Hunger Games again? He was in the Hunger Games. I can't remember. Oh, Jack Black. Now that's someone I haven't thought of. That would be pretty good. Can we load to that page, please? There we go. That might be okay. Okay, so we've got some names to add. I think I'm gonna add Jack Black for sure. Already added Richard Griffiths, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Oof. Okay, we're going back to Scythe real quick. Can I just save it? Most popular, my story, the one that I want to go to every time. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna go back to Xenocrates here. And we're gonna add Philip Seymour Hoffman. Gonna be 1. We're gonna add Jack Black. Can I see this Josh Gad? That was his name? I feel like he looks too young, but he does look enough like Philip Seymour Hoffman that I feel like he could age up into it. But I feel like these two are a little too young for this role. Yeah. That's a good, I feel like I added a better choice to this page. It needed it. I'm definitely for John Goodman, but I just feel like Richard Griffiths would be so fantastic. Philip Seymour Hoffman would be so fantastic if they were alive. What a shame. Really is a shame. Okay, getting back to the Conclave. They're not worried, right? The High Blade just found out that Scythe Faraday has 2 apprentices, and he's like, no big deal. Whatever. Oh, that's cool. It's the first time that's ever happened. And says nothing about it. But Citra's like really suspicious of this guy. And she has a right to be. If he's acting like a politician, which is basically what he's acting like, right? Then you should be suspicious because he's not being genuine. He is saying, acting in a way that's kind of like political, right? Pleasing everybody. He wants everybody to like him because he's the ruler of all the sides, which probably would want everybody to like them, like you. Yeah, okay. Rowan was nervous. He just didn't want to admit it. He knew admitting it would make Citra more worried, which would make him more worried. So he bit back his fears and misgivings and kept his eyes and ears open, taking in everything that happened around him. There were other Scythes there. He overheard two talking about how this was the big day. A boy and a girl, both older than him, maybe 18 or 19, would be getting their rings today and become junior Scythes. The girl lamented about how for the first 4 years they would have to get approval from the selection committee for their gleanings. Every single one, she complained, like we're babies. At least the apprenticeship isn't 4 years long, Rowan interjected, as a way to get into the conversation. The two looked at him with mild disgust. I mean, it takes 4 years to get a college degree, right? Rowan knew he was just digging himself deeper, but he had already committed. At least it doesn't take that long to get a license to glean. Who the hell are you? The girl asked. Ignore him. He's just a spat. A what? Rowan had been called many things, but never that. The boy smirked at him. Don't you know anything? And the girl, said the girl, spat as in spatula? It's what they call new apprentices, because you're not good for anything but flipping your own Scythe's burgers. Rowan laughed at that, which just irritated them. Then Citra came up next to them. So if we're spatulas, what does that make you? Safety scissors? Or are you just a couple of tools? The boy looked like he might slug Citra. Who's your mentor, Scythe? He asked her. He should be told of this disrespect. I am, said Scythe Faraday, putting his hand on Citra's shoulder. And you don't warrant anyone's respect until after you receive your ring. The boy seemed to shrink about 3 inches. Honorable Scythe Faraday, I'm sorry, I didn't know. The girl took a step away as if to distance herself from him. Best of luck today, he told them with a magnanimous gesture that they didn't deserve. New vocab word. We're just hitting it with the M's today. Magnanimous. Magnanimous means like, I'm pretty sure it means like grandiose. Magnanimous. Here we go. Generous or forgiving, especially toward a rival or a less powerful person, right? You're being generous or kind to somebody who probably doesn't deserve your kindness because they're awful. But that's our vocabulary word, magnanimous. Okay, let's go change that. Let's go add that to our vocab list here. Is it gonna fit? I'm gonna have to make it fit. Okay. Magnanimous. A-G. Oh, there we go. N-A-N. Here we go. That's a big word. That is a big word, but it's a fun word. Magnanimous. Here we go. Just in case that thing comes up again. Yeah, I spelled it right. Gave them a magnanimous gesture that they didn't deserve. Thank you, said the girl, but if I may say, luck plays no part. We've both trained long and have been taught well by our Scythes. Very true, Faraday said. They nodded respectful goodbyes that bordered on bows and left. After they were gone, Faraday turned to Rowan and Citra. The girl will get her ring today, he said. The boy will be denied. Oh. How do you know? Asked Rowan. I have friends on the bejeweling committee. The boy is smart, but too quick to anger. It's a fatal flaw that cannot be tolerated. As annoying as Rowan found the kid, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. What happens to apprentices that get denied? They are returned to their families to take up life where they left off. But life can never be the same after a year of training to be a Scythe, Rowan pointed out. True, said Faraday, but only good can come from a keen understanding of what it takes to be a Scythe. Rowan nodded, but thought for a man of such wisdom that seemed very naive. Scythe training was a scarring endeavor, purposefully so, but it was scarring nonetheless. The rotunda became increasingly crowded with scythes, and the marble walls, floor, and dome made voices echo into a cacophony. I smell a new vocab word. Cacophony. Cacophony is like a really loud sound. It's like reverberating sound. It's just almost like a chaotic sound. Cacophony. Did I spell that right? Yeah. Cacophony. Cacophony. Loud sound, like almost to the point of being unbearable. Cacophony of sound. Rowan tried to hear more individual conversations, but they were lost in the din. Faraday had told them that the great bronze doors to the assembly room would open promptly at 7 a.m., and the scythes would be dismissed at the stroke of 7 p.m. 12 hours to accomplish any and all business. Anything left undone would have to wait 4 months until the next conclave. In the early days, Scythe Faraday told them, as the doors opened to admit the throng, a conclave would last for 3 days, but they discovered that after the first day, it became a little more than arguments and posturing. Sorry, guys. Posturing meaning like you're putting on a show. There's still plenty of that, but it's curtailed. It behooves us all to move through the agenda quickly. The chamber was a huge semicircle with a large wooden rostrum at the front where the high blades sat, and slightly lower seats on either side of the conclave clerk who kept records, and the parliamentarian who interpreted rules and procedures if any questions arose. Scythe Faraday had told them enough about the power structure of Scythedom for Rowan to know that much. The first order of business, once everyone was settled, was the tolling of the names. One by one, in no particular order, the scythes came to the front to recite various names of people they had gleaned over the past 4 months. We can't recite them all, Scythe Faraday told them. With over 300 scythes, it would be more than 26,000 names. We are to choose 10. The ones we most remember, the ones who died most valiantly, the ones whose lives were the most notable. After each name spoken, an iron bell was rung, solemn and resonant. Rowan was pleased to hear Scythe Faraday reciting Cole Whitlock's name as one of the chosen 10. The tolling of the names got old very quickly for Citra. Even reduced to 10 names each, the recitation lasted for almost 2 hours. It was notable that the scythes saw fit to pay homage to the gleaned, but if they only had 12 hours to complete 3 months' worth of business, she didn't see the sense of it. This kind of reminds me, the tolling of the names kind of reminds me high school graduations, because that's honestly sometimes what it feels like. It's just like them repeating names. I mean, yes, you get your name said so you can walk across the stage and you can grab the piece of paper from your principal, but it's still very ritualistic and takes up a lot of time. And trust me, but there's a sense to it. Like, there's people want to go, parents want to see you, in your success. They want to take pictures. It's very important time, but that's kind of what it reminds me of, especially as a teacher sitting through graduation ceremonies, because I don't know any. I mean, I know the kids that are up there walking and I'm celebrating them, but at the same time, it's like kind of long process to happen. There was no written agenda. Great. So there was no way for her and Rowan to know what came next, and Scythe Faraday only explained things as they happened. When is our test? Will we be taken somewhere else for it? Citra asked, but Faraday shushed her. After the tolling of the names, the next order of business was a ceremonial washing of the hands. The scythes all rose and lined up before 2 basins, one at either side of the rostrum. Again, Citra didn't see the point. All this ritual, it's like something you'd see in a tone cult, she said when Faraday returned to his seat, hands still damp. Faraday leaned over to her and whispered, "Don't let any of the other scythes hear you say that. Do you feel clean after sticking your hands in water that 100 other hands have been in?" Faraday sighed. "It brings solace. It binds us as a community. Do not belittle our traditions, because one day they may be yours." "Or not," goaded Rowan. Citra shifted uncomfortably and grumbled, "It just seems like a waste of time." Faraday must have known her real gripe was with not knowing when they were going to be presented to the conclave and taken away for their test. Citra was not a girl who could endure being in the dark for long. Perhaps that's why Faraday made sure that she was. He was constantly poking at their weaknesses. Next, a number of Scythes were singled out for showing bias in their gleanings. He was constantly... This held some interest for Citra and gave her some insight as to how it all worked behind the scenes. One Scythe had gleaned too few wealthy people. She was reprimanded and assigned to only glean the rich between now and the next conclave. Another Scythe was found to have racial ratio is... Man, that's hard to say. Another Scythe was found to have racial ratio issues. High on the Hispanic, low on the Afric. It's due to the demographic where I live, he pleaded. People have a higher percentage of Hispanic in their personal ratios. High Blade Xenocrates was not swayed. Then cast a wider net, he said. Glean elsewhere. He was charged with bringing his ratios back into line or face being disciplined, which consisted of having future gleanings pre-approved by the selection committee. Having one's freedom to glean taken away was a humiliation that no Scythe wanted. 16 Scythes were taken to task. 10 were warned, 6 were disciplined. The oddest situation was a Scythe who was far too pretty for his own good. He got called out for gleaning too many unattractive people. What an idea, one of the other Scythes shouted out. Imagine what a world it would be if we gleaned only ugly people. That brought a round of laughter from the rest of the room. Okay, so that's kind of weird, right? Because, like, how do you determine someone's attractiveness? Because that's subjective, right? Like, that people find different things attractive. Okay, granted, yes, there are standards of beauty, you could say, right? Some symmetry in someone's face. But I feel like for this particular Scythe, it's kind of who is watching? Like, who is determining that? Are there statistics of people who are ugly? Do you have that statistic on you? And how do they gather that statistic, right? Like, I wonder where they got that accusation from. Like, it almost seems, I don't know, it almost seems like it's not a true accusation because, like, I don't know. Maybe it's just a plot point. But I kind of feel like this is getting a little too subjective, you know? Like, it's getting a little too, like, I don't know. Like, there's one thing to say, like, you're gleaning people who have a certain racial profile. Like, that makes sense because you can, like, see that obviously, and they have their, like, genetic codes, right? But it's just so strange to be calling people out for gleaning people who are quote unquote not attractive, right? Because, like, how do you... That's just weird. I don't know how you would determine that. It just seems such like a strange thing, especially that since we're going into it here. Okay, so everybody laughs. The Scythe tried to defend himself, claiming the old adage, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but the High Blade wasn't buying it. This was apparently his third such offense, so he was given permanent probation. He could live as a Scythe, but could not glean until the next reptilian year, the High Blade proclaimed. Okay, so we're going to talk about what this means until the next reptilian year in just a second, but, like, he uses the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but he doesn't do a very good job of defending himself. And this is his third time committing this kind of offense. So it does kind of, I don't know, maybe somebody accused him of it to begin with, and then they investigated and looked into it, and they were like, yeah, all the people he's gleaning are ugly. But, like, what if you get a person who's like, no, none of these people are ugly. Some of them are really attractive. Like, it's subjective. Like, attractiveness is not a thing that you can qualify. It's not a thing you can say, this is what makes a person attractive. I don't know. This one seems a little strange, but now that I'm reading it again, I almost want to be, like, digging into it more, just because, like, I don't recall ever, like, thinking in my head about this when I first read it, but now that I'm reading it again, it seems like it's a little suspicious, personally. Am I supposed to be suspicious? I don't think so. I don't know. Okay. Until the next reptilian year, the Highblade proclaimed. That's crazy, Citra commented, just loud enough for Rowan and Faraday to hear. No one knows what animals future years will be named after. I mean, the last reptilian year was the year of the gecko, and that was before I was born. So, because they don't keep time the same way that we keep time in today's day and age, they mark the years by naming animals. So when he says the next reptilian year, he means the next year that is named after a reptile, which is probably going to be a long time. Precisely, said Faraday with a little bit of guilty glee, which means his punishment could end next year or never. Now he'll spend his time lobbying the office of the calendaria to name a year after the skink or Gillia monster or some other reptile that has not been used. Before they moved on from the disciplinary portion of the morning, there was one more Scythe to be called out. It wasn't a matter of bias, however. I have before me an anonymous note, the Highblade said. No, I didn't mean to. Okay, there we go. I have before me an anonymous note, the Highblade said, which accuses Honorable Scythe Goddard of malfeasance. Now remember, Goddard is the bad one. He's the villain. A rumble throughout the room. Citra saw Scythe Goddard whispered to his inner circle of companions, then stood. Of what sort of malfeasance am I being accused? Unnecessary cruelty in your gleanings. And yet this accusation comes anonymously, said Goddard. I cannot believe that a fellow Scythe would show such cowardice. I demand that the accuser reveal his or herself. More rumbles around the room. No one stood up. No one took responsibility. Well then, said Goddard, I refuse to answer to an invisible accuser. Citra expected Highblade Xenocrates to press the issue. After all, an accusation from a fellow Scythe should be taken seriously. But the Highblade put the paper down and said, well, if there's nothing more, we'll take our mid-morning break. And the Scythes, Earth Grand Bringers of Death, began to file out into the rotunda for donuts and coffee. Once they were in the rotunda, Faraday leaned close to Citra and Rowan and said, there was no anonymous accuser. I'm sure that Scythe Goddard accused himself. Why would he do that? Asked Citra. Yeah. Why would he do that? To take the steam out of his enemies. It's the oldest trick in the book. Now anyone who accuses him will be assumed to be the cowardly anonymous accuser. No one will go after him now. Okay, so Faraday could be right? This could be a tactic on Goddard's part to stop people from accusing him because he is being unnecessarily cruel in his gleanings that he's doing that we have read about. Let's look at Scythe Goddard. So we looked at Scythe Curie and at Xenocrates. So let's look at Scythe Goddard. I know that the face that I saw on here last time was Oscar Isaacs, the guy who plays Moon Knight in the Marvel Disney show, which I like. I could definitely see. I feel like I could definitely see Oz. Okay, can we please go? Come on now. Hello? What's wrong? What's wrong with this? I could definitely see Oscar Isaac in the role of Scythe Goddard, but I feel like I am imagining somebody a little bit more snaky. Can we go, please? What the heck is going on right now? No. Fan cast. Okay. This is not working for me right now. I don't know why. Here we go. Please let us go in. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Oscar Isaac was the... I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I just saw that they have a casting for the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. That's absolutely nuts. Yeah, okay, so Oscar Isaac is the main one who's been cast. Let's see what other options we have. I definitely think someone more snaky would be really good for Scythe Goddard. And when I mean snaky, I just mean like, pompous, arrogant. It's going so slow right now. These people all look too nice to me. They all look too nice. Okay, so like, yeah, they all like got Jake Gyllenhaal vibes, and I feel like Jake Gyllenhaal looked too nice in the Spider-Man movie. Okay, who else could I be thinking of? I'm gonna think about this some more because I have like a picture in my head, but it's almost like a cartoon character that I have in my head of Scythe Goddard. I guess I would vote Oscar Isaac. I can see it. But I do feel like there are some other options. What if we just looked up? Yes. Okay. So yeah, I definitely feel like this is the image for sure. But I feel like, I don't know. I guess this kind of looks like him. His face looks too welcoming to me. I want somebody who looks like they're literally going to kill me. Right? Maybe the dude who played, I don't know. I really have to think about this because I can't think of anyone. Of course, I'm thinking of Christian Bale right now, which no, I don't know. Let's see who else he is like. Chris Pine, Josh Brolin, no. Idris Elba. I feel like he would be a good other Scythe, because I feel like I imagine Idris Elba in a different position and a different role. Oh, who's the guy who plays Kylo Ren? I actually feel like he would be a good Scythe Goddard. Of course, I'm gonna look up Kylo Ren. That's not a person. What's his name? His name is something. Adam Driver. Thank you. I knew it was in my head. Here we go. I'm gonna vote for. Did I click on him? Did it go? Did it go through? I don't think it did. Adam Driver. I feel like Adam Driver is my. Hello? Can you go? Can you like add that person? No? No, you can't. Okay, it's not gonna let me add Adam Driver for some reason. But he would probably be my Scythe Goddard. I mean, he looks a little young, so I feel like they'd have to put on some facial hair on him. But yes, like his this is giving me so much Scythe Goddard vibes, Yeah, Adam Driver for sure. I don't know why it's not letting me add it. It's making me very sad. Maybe I have to maybe I have to pay. I don't know. Maybe this website is broken. It could totally be broken. Okay. We'll go back. We'll go back to reading, and then maybe the website will be fixed when we're ready to start going back on our fan cast. If anything, I'm just going to make one. I'm just going to make a graphic with my cast, my dream cast for this book. Okay, so Scythe Goddard, according to Faraday, may have accused himself, right? Just so he would not be accused later by other people. Rowan found himself less interested in the stagecraft and parrying within the assembly room as he was in the things that went on outside of it. He was already getting a feeling for the Scythedom and how it truly worked. The most important business did not occur within the bronze doors, but in the rotunda and dim alcoves of the building, of which there were many, probably for this exact purpose. The early morning conversations had been just small talk, but now, as the day progressed, Rowan could see a number of scythes congregating during break into small clatches doing side deals, building alliances, pushing secret agendas. Secret agendas? He overheard one group that was planning to propose a ban on remote detonators as a method of gleaning. Not for any ethical reason, but because the gun lobby had made a sizable contribution to a particular Scythe. Another group was trying to groom one of the younger Scythes for a position on the selection committee so that he might sway gleaning choices when they needed those choices swayed. Power politics might have been a thing of the past elsewhere, but it was alive and seething in the Scythedom. Their mentor did not join any of the plotters. Faraday remained solitary and above petty politics. He did perhaps half the Scythes. We know the schemes of the schemers, he told Rowan and Citra as he negotiated a jelly donut. They only get their way when the rest of us want them to. Rowan made a point to observe Scythe Goddard. Many Scythes approached him to talk. Others grumbled about him under their breath. His entourage of junior Scythes was a multicultural bunch, in the old school meaning of the word. While no one had pristine ethnogenetics anymore, his inner circle showed traits that leaned toward one ethnos or another. The girl in green seemed mildly Pan-Asian. The man in yellow had Afric leanings. The one in fiery orange was a Caucasoid as could be, and he himself leaned slightly toward Hispanic. He was clearly a Scythe who wanted visibility. Even his grand gesture of ethnic balance was a visible one. Although Goddard never turned to look, Rowan had the distinct feeling that he knew Rowan was watching him. Okay, so we're his entourage that Rowan talks about, the junior Scythes that are behind him, we are gonna meet them individually, and I can give you a hint that you did see some of their names on the cast list from earlier. So yeah, we're gonna come back to them. I feel like you don't get a ton of description about them other than in this little paragraph, those few sentences there about them. But they are going to be more prominent later in the book, so we'll come back to them. For the rest of the morning, proposals were made and hotly debated in the assembly room. As Scythe Faraday had said, the schemers only prevailed when the more high-minded body of the Scythedom allowed. The ban on remote detonators was adopted, not because of the bribes from the gun lobby, but because blowing people up was determined to be crude, cruel, and beneath Scythedom. And the young Scythe put forward for membership on the selection committee was voted down, because no one on the committee should be in anyone's pocket. I should like to be on the Scythe committee one day, Rowan said. Citra looked at him oddly. Why are you talking like Faraday? Rowan shrugged. When in Rome. We're not in Rome, she reminded him. If we were, we'd have a much cooler place for conclave. Probably. Local restaurants vied for the chance to cater the conclave, so lunch was a buffet out in the rotunda, even more sumptuous than the one at breakfast. And Faraday packed his plate, which was out of character for him. Don't think ill of him, Scythe Curie told Rowan and Citra, her voice mellifluous, yet sharp at the same time. For those of us who take our vow of austerity seriously, conclave is the only time we allow ourselves the luxury of fine food and drink. It reminds us that we're human. Citra, who had a one-track mind, took this as her opportunity to get information. Okay, really quick, we've got a new vocab word. Mellifluous. Man, those M's. Those M words, they're coming out today. Mellifluous. I tried to sound it out. And spell it, but I couldn't. I have to look at it again. L-I-F-L-U-O-U-S. There we go. Mellifluous means, I didn't look at the meaning of the word. Okay, let me look at the meaning of the word. Mellifluous, I think it's like sweet. Yeah, okay. Musical, pleasant, right? It's got a little bit of like it's kind of like nice to listen to. Okay. Mellifluous. Citra, who had a one-track mind, took this as her opportunity to get information. When will the apprentices be tested, she asked. Scythe Curie smirked and brushed back her silky silver hair. The ones who, I'm sorry, I've got to redo this real quick. Cancel. I'm sorry. Here we go. Scythe Curie smirked and brushed back her silky silver hair. The ones who were hoping to receive their ring today were tested last night. As for all the others, you'll be tested soon enough, she said. Citra's frustration made Rowan snicker, which earned him a glare from Citra. Just shut up and stuff your face, she said. Rowan was happy to oblige. As focused as Citra was on the upcoming test, she began to wonder what in Conclave she would miss when the apprentices were taken for testing. Like Rowan, she found Conclave to be an education like none other. There were few people beyond Scythes and their apprentices who ever witnessed this, and those others who did caught only a glimpse, such as the string of salespeople after lunch, who were given 10 minutes to expound the virtues of some weapon or poison they were trying to sell to the Scythedom. And more importantly, the weapons master, who had the final decision over what the Scythedom purchased. They sounded like those awful people on info holograms. It dices, it slices, but wait, there's more. Is this the part? Okay. Yeah. This is going to be interesting. I don't know if this is the part that yes. Okay. This is the part that we hear about this. Okay. I'm excited to share this with you guys. This is a really great part. One salesperson was selling a digital poison that would turn the healing nanites in a person's bloodstream into hungry little bastards that would devour the victim from the inside out in less than a minute. He actually used the word victim, which immediately soured the Scythes. He was flatly dismissed by the weapons master. The most successful salesperson was offering a product called Touch of Quietude, which sounded more like a feminine hygiene product than a death delivery system. The woman selling it displayed a small pill, but not to give to the subject. The pill was for the Scythe. Take with water, and within seconds, your fingers will secrete a transdermal poison. Once you touch, anyone you touch for the next hour will be instantly and painlessly gleaned. The weapons master was so impressed, he came up to the stage to take a dose, then, in the ultimate demonstration, proceeded to glean the saleswoman. She sold 50 vials for the stuff to the Scythedom posthumously. Yeah, this lady, this poor lady just went to go do her job to sell a poison to a bunch of killers and then gets killed by them. I mean, I sort of feel bad for her, but at the same time, it's like, did you even think for a moment that that could happen to you? Like, do you think, like, oh gosh, that's gotta be so awful. Just, I'm gonna go do my job, gonna go sell some poison, no big deal. Last day on Earth. Last thing you do, sell a poison to a bunch of killers. I mean, maybe she knew. Maybe she knew that was going to happen. Oh, it's just such an awkward moment. It's just so awful. The rest of the afternoon consisted of more discussion, arguments, and votes about policy. Scythe Faraday only found fit to voice his opinion once, when it came to forming an immunity committee. It seems clear to me that there should be oversight for the granting of immunity, just as the selection committee provides oversight for gleaning. Rowan and Citra were pleased to see that his opinion carried a great deal of weight. Several sides who had initially voted against the forming of an immunity committee switched their vote. However, before a final tally was taken, Highblade Xenocrates announced that the time had run out for legislative issues. The subject will be at the top of our agenda for next conclave, he announced. A number of sides applauded, but several rose up and shouted their grievous discontent at the issue being tabled. Scythe Faraday did not voice his own displeasure. He took a long breath in and out. Interesting, was all he said. This might have pinged loudly on Rowan and Citra's radar, but the Highblade not immediately announced that the next order of business was the apprentices. Citra found herself wanting to grip Rowan's hand in anticipation and squeeze it until it was bloodless, but she restrained herself. Rowan, on the other hand, followed his mentor's lead. He took a deep breath, in, then out, and tried to let his anxiety wash from him. He had studied all he could study, learned all he could learn. He would do the best he could do. If he failed today, there would be more than enough chances to redeem himself. Good luck, Rowan said to Citra. You too, she returned. Let's make Scythe Faraday proud. Rowan smiled and thought that Faraday might smile at Citra as well, but he didn't. He just kept his gaze on Xenocrates. First, the candidates for Scythedom were called up. There were 4 whose apprenticeships were now complete. Having had their final test the evening before, there was nothing left but to ordain them, or not, as the case may be. Word was there was a 5th candidate who had failed the final test last night. He or she wasn't even invited to the conclave. 3 rings were brought out, resting on a red velvet pillows. The 4 looked to one another now, aware that even though they had passed their final test, one of them would not be ordained and would be sent home in shame. Scythe Faraday turned to the scythe beside him and said, "Only one scythe gleaned himself since the last conclave, and yet 3 are being confirmed today. Has the population grown so drastically in 3 months that we need 2 additional scythes?" The 3 chosen apprentices were called one by Scythe Mandela, who presided over the bejeweling committee. As each knelt before him, he said something about each of them in turn and handed them their rings, which they slipped on their fingers and held to show the conclave, which responded for each of them with an obligatory applause. Then they announced their patron Histonic, the luminary from history whom they would name themselves after. The conclave applauded with each announcement, excepting Scythe Goodall, Scythe Schrodinger, which I'm a fan of, and Scythe Colbert, which, who are they referencing? Which historical figure from, are they talking about Stephen Colbert? There's no way. There's no way. It has to be somebody else that I'm not thinking of. Into the Mid-America Scythedom. When the 3 had left the stage, the hot-tempered boy remained, just as Scythe Faraday had said earlier in the day. He stood alone after the applause died down. Then Scythe Mandela said, "Ransom Palladini, we have chosen not to ordain you as a scythe. Wherever life leads you, we wish you well. You are dismissed." He lingered for a few moments as if thinking it might be a joke, or maybe one final test. Then his lips pursed, his face turned red, and he strode quickly up the center aisle in silence, pushing through the heavy bronze doors, their hinges complaining at his exit. "How awful," said Citra. "At least they could applaud him for trying." "There are no accolades for the unworthy," Faraday said. "One of us will exit that day," Rowan pointed out to her. He resolved that if it was him, he would take his time going down that aisle. He'd make eye contact and nod to as many scythes as he could on his way out. Were he to be ejected, he would leave the final conclave with dignity. "The remaining apprentices may now come forward," said Xenocrates. Rowan and Citra rose, ready to face whatever the Scythedom had in store for them. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Oh no! Okay, so we're getting close to the final bit of this part. Oh yeah, okay. Not that close, but closer to the end of this part. And Rowan and Citra are about to be tested, their first test in front of all of the sides. But first, we have another journal entry from Scythe Curie. "I do believe people still fear death, but only 1/100th as much as they used to. I say that because based on current quotas, a person's chance of being gleaned within the next 100 years is only 1%, which means the chance that a child born today will be gleaned between now and their 5,000th year on Earth is only 50%. Of course, since we no longer count the years numerically, aside from children and adolescents, no one knows how old anyone is anymore, sometimes not even themselves. These days, people roughly know within a decade or two. At the writing of this, I can tell you that I am somewhere between 160 and 180 years old, although I don't enjoy looking at my age. Like everyone else, I turn the corner on occasion and set my biological age back substantially. But like many scythes, I don't set it back past the age of 40. So Scythe Curie has got to be a little bit older, like 40 and older. But that doesn't mean she couldn't look 30, I'm just saying. Doesn't mean she couldn't look like that. Okay, only scythes that are actually young like to look young. To date, the oldest living human being is somewhere between 300, somewhere around 300, but only because we are still so close to the age of mortality. I wonder what life will be like a millennium from now, when the average age will be nearer to 1,000. Will we all be Renaissance children, skilled at every art and science because we've had the time to master them? Or will boredom and slavish routine plague us even more than it does today, giving us less of a reason to live limitless lives? I dream of the former, but suspect the latter. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. Chapter 14. Back to the conclave. A slight stipulation. Uh-oh, we got a plot twist coming up. So a stipulation, is this a vocab word? No. Stipulation, is like a condition, right? Or a rule that you have to set in place. Like, you can have this cookie, but the stipulation is you have to clean your room. Okay. Rowan stepped on Citra's toes on his way to the aisle. She grunted slightly, but didn't wisecrack about it. That was because Citra was too busy going over her weapons and poisons in her head. Rowan's clumsiness was the least of her concerns. She thought they would be led to a room elsewhere in the building, a quiet place for their exam, but other apprentices who had been to conclave before were heading down the aisle toward the open space in front of the rostrum. They lined up in what seemed like no particular order, facing the conclave like a chorus line. So Citra joined the line next to Rowan. "What is this?" she whispered. "Not sure," he whispered back. There were 8 in total. Some stood with hard expressions, in control of their emotions. Others were trying not to look terrified. Citra wasn't sure what image she projected, and found herself annoyed that Rowan looked as casual as if he were waiting for a bus. "Honorable Scythe Curie will be the examiner today," Xenocrates said. A hush fell over the chamber as Scythe Curie, the grande dame of death, came forward. She walked down the line of apprentices twice, sizing them up. Then she said, "Each of you will be asked one question. You will have one opportunity to give an acceptable answer." One question? What kind of exam could possibly consist of one question? How could they test anyone's knowledge that way? Citra's heart beat so violently, she imagined it bursting out of her chest. Then she would find herself waking up in a revival center tomorrow, a laughingstock. Scythe Curie began at the end of the line. It meant Citra would be fourth to be questioned. Jackery Zimmerman. That's a cool name. Jackery? Jackery Zimmerman, Scythe Curie said to the gangly boy on the end. "A woman hurls herself on your blade, offering herself as a sacrifice to prevent you from gleaning her child, and dies. What do you do?" The boy hesitated for just an instant, then said, "By resisting the gleaning, she has violated the 3rd commandment. I therefore am obliged to glean the rest of her family." Scythe Curie was silent for a moment, then said, "Not an acceptable answer." But, said Jackery, she resisted. The rule says if one resists one's own gleaning, were she the chosen one, the 3rd commandment would most certainly apply. If we are ever unsure, we are obliged to err on the side of compassion. In this case, you would glean the child and arrange for the woman to be brought to a revival center, granting her a year of immunity along with the rest of her family. Then she gestured toward the assembly. "Step down. Your sponsoring Scythe will choose your punishment." Citra swallowed. Shouldn't the punishment for failure be the awful knowledge of that failure? What sort of punishments would Scythes devise for their disgraced disciples? Scythe Curie moved on to a strong-looking girl with high cheekbones, on a face that looked like it could weather a hurricane. Claudette Catalino. So many alliterative names. Claudette Catalino, Scythe Curie said. "You have made a mistake in your poison. That would never happen," Claudette said. "Don't interrupt me." "But your premise is flawed, Honorable Scythe Curie. I know my poison so well, I would never make a mistake, ever." "Well," said Curie with a deadpan irony, "how proud your sponsoring Scythe must be to have the perfect pupil in human history." It brought forth a smattering of chuckles from the room. "All right then," continued Scythe Curie, "let us say that someone irritated by your arrogance was sabotaged your poison. Your subject, a man who offered you no resistance, begins to convulse, and it appears that his end will be slow and likely filled with much more pain than his nanites can suppress. What do you do?" And without hesitation, Claudette said, "I draw the pistol that I always keep for emergencies and end the subject's suffering with a single well-placed bullet. But first I would order any family members to leave the room, sparing them the trauma of witnessing a ballistic gleaning." Scythe Curie raised her eyebrows, considering the response, and said, acceptable, and thinking of the family as a nice touch, even if hypothetical. She grinned. I am disappointed I couldn't prove you imperfect. Next was a boy whose gaze was fixed on a spot on the back wall, clearly trying to find his happy place. Noah Zabarski, said Curie. Yes, Your Honor. His voice quivered. Oh, sorry. Yes, Your Honor. His voice quivered. Citra wondered what sort of response that might evoke from Curie. What sort of question might she ask a boy so frightened? Name for me 5 species that generate neurotoxins powerful enough to be effective on a poison-tipped dart. The boy, who had been holding his breath, exhaled loud relief. Well, Philobates Arotania, of course, better known as the poison dart frog, he said. The blue-ringed octopus, the marble cone snail, the inlaid taipan snake, and, the deathstalker scorpion. Excellent, Scythe Curie said. Can you name any more? Yes, Noah told her, but you said 1 question. And what if I tell you I've changed my mind and I want 6 instead of 5? Noah took a deep breath, but didn't hold it. Then I would tell you in a most respectful way that you are not honoring your word, and a Scythe is duty-bound to honor their word. Scythe Curie smiled. Acceptable answer. Very good. Yeah, good job, Noah. Good job. And then she moved on to Citra. Citra Terranova. She had realized the Scythe knew everyone's name, and yet it came as a shock to hear her say it. Yes, Honorable Scythe Curie. The woman leaned in close, peering deeply into Citra's eyes. What's the worst thing you've ever done? Citra was prepared for just about any question, but that one. Excuse me? It's a simple question, dear. What's the worst thing you've ever done? Citra's jaw clenched. Her mouth went dry. She knew the answer. She didn't even have to think about it. Can I have a moment? Take your time. Then some random Scythe in the audience heckled, She's done so many terrible things, she's having trouble selecting just one. Laughter everywhere. In that moment, she hated them all. This is why I really need a laugh track. Wouldn't it have been great if I had a laugh track right there? Been perfect. Citra held eye contact with Scythe Curie. Those all-seeing gray eyes. She knew she couldn't back away from the question. When I was 8, she began, I tripped a girl down the stairs. She broke her neck and had to spend 3 days at a revival center. I told her that it was me. That's the worst thing I ever did. Scythe Curie nodded and offered a sympathetic grin, then said, You're lying, dear. She turned to the crowd, shaking her head, perhaps a little bit sadly. Unacceptable answer. Then she turned back to Citra. Step down, she said. Scythe Faraday will choose your punishment. She didn't argue. She didn't insist that she was telling the truth because she wasn't. She had no idea how Scythe Curie knew. Citra went back to her place, unable to look at Scythe Faraday, and he said nothing to her. Then Scythe Curie moved on to Rowan, who seemed so smug Citra had just wanted to hit him. Rowan Damish, Scythe Curie asked, What do you fear? What do you fear above all else? Rowan did not hesitate in his response. He shrugged and said, I don't fear anything. Citra wasn't sure she heard him right. Did he say he didn't fear anything? Had he lost his mind? Perhaps you want to take some time before answering, Scythe Curie prompted, but Rowan just shook his head. I don't need any more time. That's my answer. Not going to change it. Absolute silence in the room. Citra found herself involuntarily shaking her head. And then she realized he was doing this for her. So she wouldn't have to suffer alone through whatever punishment was in store. So she wouldn't feel she had fallen behind him. Although she still wanted to smack him, now it was for an entirely different reason. So, said Scythe Curie, today we have one perfect apprentice and one fearless one, she sighed. But I'm afraid that no one is entirely fearless, so your answer, as I'm sure you must know, is unacceptable. She waited, perhaps thinking Rowan might respond to that, but he did not. He just waited for her to say, Step down, Scythe. Faraday will choose your punishment. Rowan to return to his place next to Citra as nonchalant as he could. You're an idiot, she whispered to him. He gave her the same shrug he gave Scythe Curie. Guess so. Gosh, I love Rowan. This is why I feel like he really has to be like look really tough, you know? Oh, it did add to it. It added my Adam Driver picture. Okay, we'll come back to it. I'll come back to it after this part. You think I don't know why you did that? Maybe I did it so that I'll look better at the next conclave. Maybe if I gave too good an answer today, my next question would be harder. But Citra knew it was false. Faulty logic. Rowan didn't think that way, and then Scythe Faraday spoke up, his voice quiet and measured, but somehow carrying an intensity that was chilling. You shouldn't have done that. I'll accept whatever punishment you see fit, Rowan said. It's not about punishment, he snapped. But by now, Scythe Curie had questioned a few more apprentices. One was set to sit, 2 others stayed. Maybe Scythe Curie will see what I did as noble, Rowan suggested. Yes, and so will everyone else, Faraday said. Motives can easily be beaten into weapons. Which proves, Citra said to Rowan, that you're an idiot. But he only grinned idiotically. She thought she had the last word on the matter and that it was over until they returned home, where no doubt Scythe Faraday would inflict some annoying but fair punishment that fit the crime. She was mistaken. After the apprentices were done being traumatized, the focus of the Scythes began to wear down. There was now a constant murmur as Scythes discussed dinner plans as the hour approached 7. The remaining business was of little interest to anyone. Issues of building maintenance and whether or not Scythes should be required to announce the turning of a corner so it wasn't so shocking when they looked 30 years younger at the next conclave. It was as things were wrapping up that one Scythe stood up and loudly addressed Xenocrates. She was the one dressed in green with emeralds embroidered into her robe, one of Scythe Goddard's bunch. Excuse me, Your Excellency, she began, although clearly she was speaking to the entire assembly, not just the High Blade. I'm finding myself troubled by this set of new apprentices, more specifically the apprentices taken on by Honorable Scythe Faraday. Both Citra and Rowan looked up. Faraday did not. He seemed frozen, looking downward, almost in meditation, or perhaps steeling himself for what was to come. Oh no. To the best of my knowledge, a Scythe has never taken on 2 apprentices and set them in competition for the ring, she continued. Xenocrates looked over to the parliamentarian, who had jurisdiction in such matters. There's no law against it, Scythe Rand, said the parliamentarian. Yes, Scythe Rand continued, but clearly the competition has turned into camaraderie. How will we ever know which is the better candidate if they continue to aid each other? Your complaint is duly noted, said Xenocrates, but Scythe Rand was not done. I propose that, to ensure this competition is truly competition, we add a slight stipulation, which is the title of this chapter. Scythe Faraday rose to his feet as if launched from his chair. I object, he shouted. This conclave cannot stipulate how I train my apprentices. It is my sole right to teach them, train them, and discipline them. Rand held up her hands in a gesture of mock magnanimity. Magnanimous is one of our words, right? She's like, oh, no. She's like this. I'm being generous. I merely seek to make your ultimate choice fair and honest. Do you think you can beguile this conclave with your baubles and vanity? We are not so base as to be dazzled by shiny things. What is your proposal, Scythe Rand? Asked Xenocrates. I object, shouted Faraday. You can't object to something she has not yet said. Faraday bit down his objection and waited. Citra watched, feeling almost detached, as if this were a tennis match and it was a match point. But she wasn't an observer, was she? She was the ball, and so was Rowan. I propose, said Scythe Rand, with the slickness of a Deathstalker scorpion, that upon the confirmation of the winner, the first order of business will be for that winner to glean the loser. Gasps and rumbles from around the room, and Citra couldn't believe it. Some laughter and affirmations as well. She wanted to believe the woman in green could not be serious, that this was yet another level of a test. Faraday was so beside himself he said nothing at first. He couldn't even find the words to object. Finally, he thundered his fury like a force of nature. A wave pounding the shore. This flies in the face of everything we are, everything we do. We are in the business of gleaning, but you and Scythe Goddard and all of his disciples, you would turn this into a blood sport. Nonsense, said Rand. It makes perfect sense. The threat of gleaning will ensure that the best applicant comes out on top. And then, rather than striking it down as ridiculous to Citra's horror, Xenocrates turned to the parliamentarian. Is there a rule against it? The parliamentarian considered and said, since there is no precedent for the treatment of a double apprenticeship, there are no rules as to how it should be dealt with. The proposal is within our guidelines. Guidelines? Shouted Faraday. Guidelines? The moral fabric of Scythedom should be our guidelines. To even consider this is barbaric. Oh, please, said Xenocrates with an exaggerated sweep of his hand. Spare us the melodrama, Faraday. This is, after all, the consequence of your decision to take on 2 apprentices when 1 would have been sufficient. Then the clock began to strike 7 o'clock. I demand a full debate and vote on this, Scythe Faraday pleaded, but 3 bells had already rung, and Xenocrates ignored him. As is my prerogative as High Blade, I so stipulate that in the matter of Rowan Damish and Citra Terranova, whosoever shall prevail will be required to glean the other upon receipt of his or her ring. Then he banged his gavel heavily upon the rostrum, adjoining conclave and sealing their fate. Big gasps. Big shock. On page 154, we're like, oh, not even in the middle of the book. But, oh my gosh, huge change. So this is what it means, right? That the consequence of failure could mean losing their own on the screen, right? Like, this could mean that, or at least it does mean that one of them, instead of just going back to their normal life, will die instead of becoming a scythe. Who's it gonna be? Who's gonna kill the other? That's the question we have to answer for the rest of this book. Or is something else gonna happen entirely? I don't know. We've got hundreds of pages to find out. That was the end of chapter 14. We're moving on. We've got another journal entry, again from Scythe Curie. There are times I long for a relationship with the Thunderhead. I suppose we always want what we can't have. Others can call on the Thunderhead for advice, ask it to resolve disputes. Some rely on it as a confidant, for it's known to have a compassionate, impartial ear and never gossips. The Thunderhead is the world's best listener, but not for scythes. For us, the Thunderhead is eternally silent. We have full access to its wealth of knowledge, of course. The Scythedom uses the Thunderhead for countless tasks, but to us, it's simply a database, a tool, nothing more. As an entity, as a mind, the Thunderhead does not exist for us, and yet it does, and we know it. Estrangement from the collective consciousness of humanity's wisdom is just one more thing that sets scythes apart from others. The Thunderhead must see us. It must be aware of the Scythedom's petty bickering and growing corruption, even though it has pledged non-interference. Does it despise us scythes but abides us because it has to? Or does it simply choose to not think of us at all? And which is worse, to be despised or ignored? From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. H.S. is Honorable Scythe, right? Okay. You know, I've read this book before. I've read those journal entries so many times before, and I'm just now realizing that that's what it stands for. Good job. Okay, chapter 15, The Space Between. The night was bleak and rain streaked the windows of the train. Oh, wait, hang on. I was going to go back to this. Oh, no. I was going to go back to this and, well, I was going to go back to this. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, Scythe Rand. It's so funny. They found a girl with a green hood, right? It's almost like she took this picture for this role. And she's supposed to look, according to Rowan, she's supposed to look vaguely Pan-Asian, right? The girl in green seemed mildly Pan-Asian. So she's supposed to look kind of, she's supposed to look Asian, like she's from an Eastern country. Okay, who have we got? Okay. This one's good, mainly because she's just wearing the hood. I kind of want her to look meaner, though. I like Jessica because she looks a little bit more meaner. I'm going to save this picture just because it's actually like a really good picture for this particular book because it's like perfect. But I also really like Jessica. I like, because Claudia looks way too nice. Jessica looks like perfect because she looks mean. I don't know. I'd have to look up other actresses that could be Scythe Rand. There's not a lot of characters on this choice list, but the ones that they have are not too bad. And then, did we see any others? No, we didn't see any others. Okay. Go ahead and get rid of those. Maybe that's the problem. I think it is the website, though. I don't think I'm the problem. I think my internet is the problem. All right, I'm going to take a little mini break because I have to go to the bathroom. We've really got like 20 pages left. We're super close to the end of this chapter. So I'm just going to BRB for a second, and I will be right back. Okay. So close to the end of this part. I really want to finish it during this stream. I think we probably will. Okay. So, recap. Citra and Rowan go to Conclave. Citra messes up. And she kind of knows that she messed up, right? She didn't think that Scythe Curie would be able to see through her lie, but she does. Probably because Citra is a genuine person, and you can easily tell when she's lying, right? Unfortunately, because she is one of those people. She's probably like me, right? Like you can tell. You can tell when she's lying. She kind of gives it away, especially in a situation like that where she's already really nervous. So yeah, she probably didn't want to tell the whole conclave what the most horrible thing she ever did was. And I guess, I wouldn't want to either, but she lost. And so Rowan, being the gentleman that he is, he also messed up his answer on purpose, like very purposefully messed up his answer in order to be punished. And it shows. And even Scythe Faraday knows, kind of like it seems like he knows what's going to happen when he does that, when Rowan messes up his answer. Because one of Scythe Goddard's friends says, well, they don't really seem like they're in competition. So maybe we should make it more interesting. Maybe we should make them kill each other. Maybe should we make them kill each other when one of them wins. A real battle royale. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. So it's not looking good. Chapter 15, The Space Between. The night was bleak and rain streaked the windows of the train, distorting the lights beyond until the lights were gone. Rowan knew they were slicing through the countryside now, but the darkness could have been the airless expanse of space. I won't do it, Citra finally said, breaking the silence that had engulfed them since leaving Conclave. They can't make me do it. Rowan didn't say a word, didn't even look at her, so Faraday didn't say a word, didn't even look at her, so Rowan took it upon himself to answer. Yes, they can. Finally, Faraday looked to them. Rowan is right, he said. They will find whatever button that will make you dance. And dance you will, no matter how hideous the tune. Citra kicked the empty seat in front of her. How could they be so awful? And why do they hate us so much? It's not all of them, Rowan said, and I don't think it's really about us. Clearly, Faraday was a respected Scythe, and although he didn't come out against Goddard today, his feelings about the man were clear. Goddard must see Faraday as a threat. Attacking Rowan and Citra was a warning shot. What if we both fail? Citra suggested. If we're lousy apprentices and they can't choose either of us. And yet they will, Faraday told her with an authority and finality that left little room for doubt. No matter how poorly you perform, they will still choose one of you, for the spectacle alone. Then he scowled in disgust and to set the precedent. I'll bet Goddard has enough friends to make sure it happens, says Rowan. I think he has the high blade on his side, too. Indeed, Faraday said with a world-weary sigh. Never before have there been so many wheels within wheels in the Scythedom. Rowan closed his eyes, wishing he could close his mind as well and hide from his own thoughts. In 8 months, I will be killed by Citra, he thought, or I will kill her. And calling it gleaning didn't change the fact of what it was. He cared for Citra. But enough to surrender his life and let her win? Citra certainly wouldn't back down to let him earn the ring. When he opened his eyes, he caught her staring at him. She didn't look away. Rowan, she said, whatever happens, I want you to know. Don't, Rowan told her. Just don't. And the rest of the ride was silence. Citra, who was not the heaviest sleeper, found herself awake all night after they arrived home. Images of the scythes she saw at Conclave filled even the hint of dreams, jarring her back to unwanted wakefulness. The wise ones, the schemers, the compassionate, and those who did not seem to care. Such a delicate charge as pruning the human race should not be the subject to quirks of personality. Scythes were supposed to be above the petty, just as they were above the law. Faraday certainly was. If she became a scythe, she would follow his lead. And if she didn't become one, it wouldn't matter because she'd be dead. Perhaps there was some sort of twisted wisdom in the decision to have one of them gleaned by the other. Whoever wins will begin their life as a scythe in abject sorrow, never to forget the cost of that ring. Morning came with no great fanfare. It was just an ordinary day, like any other. Rain had passed. The sun peeked from behind shifting clouds. It was Rowan's turn to make breakfast, eggs and hash browns. He never cooked the potatoes long enough. Hash pails, Citra always called them. Faraday never complained when the meals they made were subpar. He ate what they served and didn't tolerate complaints from either of them. The punishment for making something barely edible was having to eat it yourself. Citra ate even though she didn't have an appetite. Even though the whole world had slid off its axis, breakfast was breakfast. How dare it be? When Faraday broke the silence, it felt like a brick flying through the window. I will go out alone today. The two of you will attend to your studies. Yes, Scythe Faraday, Citra said, with Rowan saying the same in a half-second echo. For you, nothing has changed. Citra looked down to her cereal. It was Rowan who dared to state the obvious. Everything has changed, sir. And then Faraday said something enigmatic that would only resonate with them much later. Perhaps everything will change again. Then he left them. The space between, that's the title of the chapter. The space between Roa and Citra had quickly become a minefield, a dangerous no man's land that promised nothing but misery. It was hard enough to negotiate with Scythe Faraday there, but his absence left the two of them with no one to mediate the space between them. Rowan stayed in his room, studying there rather than going into the weapons room, which would feel painfully wrong without Citra sitting with him. Still, he kept his door cracked on the faint hope that she'd want to bridge the distance. He heard her leave, probably for a run, and she was gone for a good long time. Her way of dealing with the dark discomfort of their new situation was to remove herself from it even more completely than Rowan had. After she returned, Rowan knew there would be no peace between them or within himself until he took the first step into that minefield. He stood outside her door for at least a full minute before he worked up the nerve to knock. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice muffled by the closed door. "Can I come in? It's not locked." Another one. He turned the knob and slowly opened the door. She was in the middle of the room with a hunting knife, practicing bladecraft against the empty air, as if battling ghosts. "Nice technique," Rowan said, then added, "if you're planning on leading a pack of angry wolves. Skill is skill, whether you use it or not." She sheathed the blade. It was really hard for me to say. She sheathed the blade, tossed it on her desk, and put her hands on her hips. "So, what do you want?" "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for shutting you down before. On the train, I mean." Citra shrugged. "I was babbling. You were right to shut me up." The moment began to get awkward, so Rowan just went for it. "Should we talk about this?" She turned away from him and sat on her bed, picking up a book on anatomy and opening it as if she were about to start studying. She hadn't yet realized she was holding it upside down. "What's to talk about? I'll kill you or you'll kill me. Either way, I don't want to think about it until I have to." She glanced at the open book, turned it right side up, then gave up the charade completely, closing it and tossing it to the floor. "I just want to be left alone, okay?" Even though Rowan sat on the edge of her bed, and when she didn't tell him to go, she shifted a little bit closer. She watched him, but said nothing. He wanted to reach for her, maybe touch her cheek, but thinking about that made him think of the saleswoman who was gleaned by touch. What a perverse poison that was. Rowan wanted to kiss her. There was no denying that anymore. He had suppressed the urge for weeks because he knew it would not be tolerated by the Scythe. But Faraday wasn't there. And the turmoil they had both been hurled into had washed all bets off the table. So true. Then to his surprise, she suddenly leached forward and kissed him, catching him completely off guard. "There," she said. "We've done it. Now it's out of the way and you can leave." Yeah, what a horrible way to have your first kiss. By the way, it's a horrible way to have a first kiss. "What if I don't want to?" And she hesitated long enough to make it clear that staying was a distinct possibility. But in the end, she said, "What good would it do, really, for either of us?" She moved farther away on the bed, bringing her knees to her chest. "I haven't fallen in love with you, Rowan." But she has. I haven't fallen in love with you, Rowan, and now I want to keep it that way." Rowan got up and moved to the safety of the threshold before turning back to her. "It's all right, Citra," he told her. "I haven't fallen in love with you either." What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you just guarding my door? Okay. Sorry, that's my cat. Trying to let the ghosts inside my house. Okay, so, oh my god, Rowan and Citra. It's a Romeo and Juliet. Oh my god, Rowan and Citra, Romeo and Juliet. That's crazy. Also, it's like super sad. Like they're so cute. I love them. I love the alternating perspective, so you can see how much he likes her, and you can see how much she likes him, and how it'll never work. And I love it. But it's sad. Okay, let's keep going. We've got a new journal entry. "I am not a man, easily brought to fury, but how dare the old guard Scythes presume to dictate my behavior?" Okay, so this journal entry is not like the typical journal entries we've been reading. This is not Scythe Faraday. Or no, this is not Scythe Curie. "I am not a man easily brought to fury, but how dare the old guard Scythes presume to dictate my behavior? Let every last one of them glean themselves, and we can be done with their self-loathing, sanctimonious ways. I'm a man who chooses to glean with pride, not shame. I choose to embrace life, even as I deal death. Make no mistake, we Scythes are above the law because we deserve to be. I see a day when new Scythes will be chosen not because of some esoteric moral high ground, but because they enjoy the taking of life." Can anybody guess whose journal entry this is? After all, this is a perfect world. And in a perfect world, don't we all have the right to love what we do? From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Goddard. That's a different journal entry. That's a different one, right? It tricks you almost. It tricks you into thinking it's like, oh, is this a normal journal entry from South Korea? Oh, no, it's not. It is not. Chapter 16, Pool Boy. Okay, we are 2 chapters away, I think, from the end of this book, or for the end of this part. Chapter 16, Pool Boy. There was a Scythe at the door of the executive's mansion. Actually, a quartet of them. Although the other 3 stood back, allowing the one in royal blue to be the point man. Okay, so we're third person omniscient again, or third person limited again, but this time, just like with the airplane, we're seeing from the perspective of a person that is interacting with Scythe Goddard. The executive was frightened, terrified actually, but he hadn't risen to this level of success by wearing his emotions on his sleeve. He had a keen mind and a consummate poker face. He would not be intimidated by death on his doorstep, even when death's robe was studded with diamonds. I'm surprised you got to the front door without my gate guards alerting me, the executive said, as nonchalant as could be. They would have alerted you, but we gleaned them, one of the other Scythes said, a woman in green with Pan-Asian leanings. The executive would not allow this news to daunt him. Ah, so you need me to give you their personal information in order for you to alert their families? Not exactly, said the lead Scythe. May we come in? And since the executive knew he didn't have the right to refuse, he stepped aside. The diamond-studded Scythe and his rainbow of subordinates followed, looking around at the understated opulence of the mansion. I am Honorable Scythe Goddard, and these are my junior associates, Scythes Volta, Chomsky, and Rand. Sharp robes, commented the executive, still successfully capping his fear. Thank you, said Scythe Goddard. I can see you are a man of taste. My compliments to your decorator. That would be my wife, he said, then inwardly grimaced, to have brought her in any way to the attention of the life-takers. Scythe Volta, the one in yellow with an Afric look about him, strolled around the grand foyer, peering through the archways that led to the other areas of the mansion. Excellent feng shui, he said. Energy flow is very important in a home so large. I imagine there's a good-sized pool, said the one in flame-colored robe embedded with rubies. Scythe Chomsky. He was blonde, pale, and brutish. The executive wondered if they were enjoying prolonging this encounter. The more he played along, the more power they had, so he cut through the small talk before they could see him crack. May I ask your business here? Scythe Goddard glanced at him, but ignored the question. He gestured to his subordinates, and 2 of the 3 left. The one in yellow took the winding stairs. The woman in green went to explore the rest of the first floor. The pale one in orange stayed nearby. He was the largest of them, and perhaps a bodyguard for their leader. As if anyone would actually be stupid enough to strike a Scythe. The executive wondered where his children were at that moment. Out back with the nanny? Upstairs? He wasn't sure. And the last thing he wanted was to have Scythes in his house out of his sight. Wait, he said. Whatever your purpose, I'm sure we could reach some sort of arrangement. You do know who I am, don't you? Scythe Goddard took a piece of artwork on display in the foyer and said, and instead of looking at him, someone wealthy enough to own a Cézanne. Could it be that he didn't know? That their presence here was not planned, but random? Scythes were supposed to be random in their choices, but this random? He found the dam that held back his fear was fracturing. Please, the executive said. I'm Maxim Easley. Surely the name means something to you. The Scythe looked at him without a hint of recognition. It was the flame-clad one who had reacted. The guy who runs Regenesis? Finally, there came some recognition from Goddard. Oh, right. Your company is number 2 in the turn corner industry. Soon to be number 1, easily reflexively bragged. Once we release our technology that allows cellular regression beyond the 21st year. I have friends who have used your services. I myself have yet to turn a corner. You could be the first to officially use our new process. Goddard laughed and turned to his associate. Could you imagine me as a teenager? Not a chance. The more amused they were, the more horrified Easley became. No sense in hiding his desperation anymore. There must be something you want, something of value I can offer you. And finally, Goddard laid his cards on the table. I want your estate. Easily resisted the urge to say, excuse me, because the statement was not ambiguous in any way. It was an audacious demand. But Maxim Easley was nothing if not a negotiator. I have a garage with more than a dozen mortal age motor vehicles. Priceless, every last one of them. You can have any of them. You can have them all. The Scythe stepped closer, and Easley suddenly found a blade pressed to his neck, to the right of his Adam's apple. He never saw the Scythe draw it. So quick was he that it seemed to disappear at his jugular. Let's clarify, Goddard said calmly. We are not here to barter and bargain. We are Scythes, which means that by law, anything we want, we can take. Any life we wish to end, we will. Simple as that. You have no power here. Do I make myself clear? Easley nodded, feeling the blade almost but not quite cut his skin as he did. Satisfied, Goddard removed the blade from his neck. An estate like this must require a sizable staff. Housekeepers, gardeners, perhaps even a stable personnel. How many do you employ? Easley tried to speak, but nothing came out. He cleared his throat and tried again. 12, he said. 12 full-time employees. Then the woman in green, Scythe Rand, emerged from the kitchen, bringing with her a man Easley's wife had recently hired. He was in his early 20s, or appeared so. Easley couldn't remember his name. And who is this? Goddard asked. The pool boy. Pool boy, mimicked Scythe Rand. Goddard nodded to the muscle-bound Scythe in orange, who then approached the young man, reached up, and touched his cheek. The pool boy collapsed to the ground, his head hitting the marble. His eyes stayed open, but no life remained in them. He had been gleaned. It works, said Scythe Chomsky, looking at his hand. Definitely worth what the weapon master paid. Now then, said Goddard, while we are within our rights to take anything we choose, I'm a fair man. In exchange for this lovely estate, I will offer you, your family, and your surviving staff full immunity for every year that we choose to remain here. Easley's relief was intense and immediate. How odd, he thought, to have his home stolen and yet feel relieved. On your knees, Goddard said, and Easley obeyed. Kiss it. Easley did not hesitate. He planted his lips on the ring, pressing hard, feeling the edge of the setting catch on his lip. Now, you will go to your office and resign your position effective immediately. This time, Easley did say, excuse me? Someone else can do your job. I'm sure there are others itching for the opportunity. Easley rose, his legs still a bit shaky. But why? Can't you just let me and my family leave? We won't bother you. We'll take nothing but the clothes on our backs. You'll never see us again. But alas, I can't let you leave, said Scythe Goddard. I need a new pool boy. Got another chapter about Scythe Goddard. He's acting so suspicious. It's not a typical behavior for a Scythe. And I think like the start of this chapter is a good indicator of like how he perceives this, right? He does not think of himself, Scythe Goddard does not think of himself like a normal person or even a normal Scythe, right? He thinks of himself as better than others, better than anybody that he works with or that he anybody else in the world, right? He's like, we deserve to have this special power because we are so great and special. And he demonstrates this by taking this man's home and forcing him to work as a pool boy for his own estate. And I mean, what's the man going to say? The man's not going to be like, no, right? He doesn't want to risk dying to displease this guy. So, yeah, it's kind of a tricky situation. We're in the last chapter of this part. We've only got a couple more pages, but I do want us to go back to this title, right? So the first part could be considered the exposition, right? Because you're learning about the world, you're learning about the characters, you're learning about like the setup, right, for the conflict. The part one's title is called Robe and Ring, right? Which is a great starter because it's like, okay, these are the two things that make up a scythe. These are the two things you need to know about to really understand the world. And this title, No Laws Beyond These, is also really telling about this part because we are really looking at the kind of the gray area that happens between the laws, right, that are set down for scythes. And we look at people who interpret those laws in the way that Faraday does, where he's compassionate, but then we also look at the people who interpret it differently. Because Scythe Goddard isn't necessarily breaking the laws, but he is using them to his benefit, to his power. Okay. I think it's wise that scythes may not glean one another. It is very clearly implemented to prevent Byzantine grabs at power. But where power is concerned, there are always those who find ways to grasp it. I think it's also wise that we are allowed to glean ourselves. I admit there were times when I considered it, when the weight of responsibility felt so heavy, leaving the yoke of the world behind seemed a better alternative. But one thought always stayed my mind from committing the final act. If not me, who? Will the scythe who replaces me be as compassionate and fair? I can accept a world without me in it, but I can't bear the thought of other scythes gleaning in my absence. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie. Okay. I feel like this particular journal entry does kind of set up for the next chapter, because it does say that you can't scythes cannot kill each other, right? They can't try to kill each other to get power or to get a region or whatever. But scythes are allowed to kill themselves. So it is okay for a scythe to commit suicide. So let's get in to this last chapter of part 2. It's going to be a shocker. You're going to hate me for ending the stream on this, but we gotta finish it up here and then come back to part 3 next time. Okay, here we go. Chapter 17, the 7th commandment. Now let's flip back real quick to the beginning of this part because it tells us the commandments for the scythes. And the 7th commandment, let's see. The 7th commandment, thou shalt kill no scythe beyond thyself. And we just had Curie's journal entry talking about this very subject. Okay. Chapter 17, the 7th commandment. Citra and Rowan were awakened sometime after midnight by someone pounding on the front door. They left their rooms, meeting in the hallway, and both reflexively glanced toward Scythe Faraday's closed door. Citra turned the knob, finding it unlocked, and pushed it open just enough to see the scythe wasn't there. His bed had not yet been slept in tonight. It was unusual, but not unheard of, for him to stay out this late. They had no idea what his occasional late nights were about, and they didn't want to ask. Curiosity was one of those first casualties of apprenticeship. They had long since learned there were many things they'd rather not know in the life of a scythe. The relentless pounding continued, but not the rapping of knuckles, but the full-fisted heel of a hand. So, said Rowan, he forgot his keys, so? It was the most sensible explanation, and didn't the most sensible explanation tend to be correct? They approached the door, steeling themselves for admonishment. How could you not hear me knocking? He would chide. Last I heard, no one's been deaf for 200 years. But when they opened the door, they were faced not with Scythe Faraday, but with a pair of officers. Not common peace officers, but members of the Blade Guard. The sign of scythedom clearly emblazoned on the breast of their uniforms. Citra Terranova and Rowan Damish, one of the guard's men asked. Yes, answered Rowan. He stepped slightly forward, putting a shoulder in front of Citra in a sort of protective stance. He felt it gallant, but Citra found it irritating. You'll need to come with us. Why? Asked Rowan. What's going on? It's not our place to say, the second guardsman told them. Citra pushed Rowan's protective shoulder to the side. We're Scythe's apprentices, she said, which means the Blade Guard serves us and not the other way around. You have no right to take us against our will. Which was probably untrue, but it gave the guards pause. And then came a voice from the shadows. I'll handle this. Out of the darkness swelled a familiar figure, wholly out of place in Faraday's neighborhood. The high blade's gilded robe did not shine in the dimness of the doorstep. It seemed dull, almost brown. Please, You must come with me immediately. Someone will be sent for your things." As Rowan was in pajamas and Citra a bathrobe, neither was too keen to obey, but they both sensed that their night clothes were the least of their concerns. "Where's Scythe Faraday?" Rowan asked. The High Blade took a deep breath, in and sighed. "He invoked the 7th commandment," Xenocrates said. "Scythe Faraday has gleaned himself." Okay, so things will change again, right? That's the last thing that Scythe Faraday told them before he left. Things may change again. Can you, seriously, okay, we're gonna come back to this. I'm gonna finish these last 2 pages and then I'm gonna talk about it. Highblade Xenocrates was a bloated bundle of contradictions. He wore a robe of rich Baroque brocades, yet on his feet were frayed, tread-worn slippers. He lived in a simple log cabin, yet the cabin had been reassembled on the rooftop of Fulcrum City's tallest building. His furniture was mismatched and thrift store shabby, yet on the floor beneath them were museum-quality tapestries that could have been priceless. Excuse me. "I can't tell you how sorry I am," he told Rowan and Citra, who were still too shell-shocked to wrap their minds around what had happened. It was morning now, the 3 of them having ridden in a private hypertrain to Fulcrum City, and they were now out on a small wooden deck that overlooked a well-tended lawn that ended in a sheer ledge and a 70-story drop. The High Blade did not want anything to obstruct his view, and anyone stupid enough to trip over the ledge would deserve the time and cost of revival. "It's always a terrible thing when a scythe leaves us," the High Blade lamented, "especially one as well respected as Scythe Faraday." Xenocrates had a full retinue of assistants and flunkies in the outside world to help him go about his business, but here in his home he didn't have as much as a single servant. Yet another contradiction. He had brewed them tea and now poured it for them, offering cream but no sugar. Rowan sipped his, but Citra refused the slightest kindness from the man. "He was a fine scythe and a good friend," Xenocrates said. "He will be sorely missed." It was impossible to guess at Xenocrates' sincerity. Like everything else about him, his words seemed both sincere and not at the same time. He had told them the details of Scythe Faraday's demise on the way here. About 10:15 the evening before, Faraday was on a local train platform. Then, as a train approached, he hurled himself in front of it. There were several witnesses, all probably relieved that the scythe had gleaned himself and not any of them. Had it been anyone but a scythe, his broken body would have been rushed to the nearest revival center. But rules for scythes were clear. There would be no revival. "But it doesn't make sense," Citra said, fighting tears with little success. "He wasn't the kind of man who would do something like that. He took responsibility as a scythe and training us very seriously. I can't believe he would just give up like that." "Agreed, Citra. Agreed. This is so out of character for Scythe Faraday. For them to be like so blindsided by the fact that he gleaned himself, they're in shock. But here's the only thing I will say in the back of my mind. I'm thinking people who commit suicide may not always show signs of depression or wanting to commit suicide to other people. So it can come as a great shock if you find out that someone killed themselves, even in our world today. So I guess I'm kind of applying that to Faraday and to this situation, but it just doesn't seem like him. And Citra is right to be suspicious. Rowan held his silence on the subject, waiting for the High Blade's response. "Actually," Xenocrates said, "it makes perfect sense." He took an excruciatingly long sip of tea before he spoke again. "Traditionally, when a mentor scythe self-gleans, anyone bound to an apprenticeship is unbound." Citra gasped, realizing the implication. "He did it," said Socrates, "to spare one of you from having to glean the other." "Which means," said Rowan, "that this is your fault." And then he added with a little bit of derision, "Your Excellency." Xenocrates stiffened. "If you were referring to the decision to set the two of you in mortal competition, that was not my suggestion. I was merely carrying out the will of the scythedom. And frankly, I find your insinuation offensive." Well, you should. And he's like, okay, this is actually like a very well-written character, because if Xenocrates is as political as they kind of are perceiving him to be, then this is absolutely something he would do, which is shirk responsibility. Oh, that wasn't me. I just said it was okay because everybody else wanted it. You know, it wasn't me that made that decision. I'm not the one who forced this to happen. I'm just the one who carried it out. Take responsibility. You're a grown man. Like, yeah, I did it. I said that this could happen. You know, like it just makes him even more like snake-like and not trustworthy, you know? We never heard the will of the Scythedom, Rowan reminded him, because there never was a vote. Xenocrates stood, ending the conversation with, "I'm sorry for your loss." It was more than just Rowan's and Citra's loss, though. It was the loss to the entire Scythedom, and Xenocrates knew it, whether he said it or not. "So, that's it then," said Citra. "We go home now?" "Not exactly," said Xenocrates, this time not looking at either of them in the eye. "Not exactly, except for that's what he wanted." Okay, let's see. "While it's traditional for the apprentices of dead scythes to go free, another scythe can come forward and take over the training. It's rare, but it does happen." "You?" Citra asked. "You volunteered to train us now?" It was Rowan who saw the truth of it in his eyes. "No, it's not him," Rowan said. "It's someone else. My responsibilities as High Blade would make it far too difficult to take on apprentices. You should be flattered, however. Not just one, but two scythes have come forward, one for each of you." Citra shook her head. "No, we were pledged to Scythe Faraday and no one else. He died to free us, so we should be freed." "I'm afraid I've already given my blessing, so the matter is settled." He turned to each of them in turn. "You, Citra, will now be the apprentice of Honorable Scythe Curie." Yay! We like that. Oh, we're going to cheer. Yeah, we're going to cheer for that one. Yay! Scythe Curie. We like Scythe Curie. So Citra's going to Scythe Curie. Can you guess where Rowan's going to go? Rowan closed his eyes. He knew what was coming next, even before Xenocrates said the words. "And you, Rowan, will complete your training in the capable hands of Honorable Scythe Goddard." That's right. And that's the end of part 2. That's the end of part 2. So, wow, there were so many twists and turns in that part. So many twists and turns, right? You had, you know, just like so many things. Okay, I was going to talk about this. Scythe Faraday gleans himself supposedly to save Rowan and Citra, but ends up doing the exact opposite and ends up putting them in the hands. Well, Citra's going to be okay because she's with Scythe Curie. Scythe Curie's a great person, or at least I think she's a great character. I'm excited about that. But Scythe Goddard is not, and Rowan is going to go train with him, which is going to be probably really interesting experience. But there were so many twists and turns in this chapter. First, we had pitting Rowan and Citra against each other. They had to fight to the death. And then Faraday gleaning himself so he could try to get them out of it, and it didn't work. Yeah. So lots of issues, lots of conflict arising. I think, you know, the first part of the chapter, I keep saying that, first part of the book is a lot of exposition, but I think it does a really good job of setting you up for this part, which is all about setting up the conflict, right? Like especially the conflict between Faraday and Goddard, or even just Citra and Rowan, right? Because now they're going to be on diametrically opposed sides. I think, you know, we hear about this a little bit in Goddard's journal entry when he talks about the old guard scythes. I think Faraday is an old guard, and I think Curie is part of that old guard too, right? She has kind of the same ideals about being compassionate and giving people kind of release when they are gleaned, right? And Goddard is all about the pleasure he gets from it and about taking the power. So we have the two characters. That whole kind of conflict has been set up in this chapter, and now we have the two main characters going in those two completely different directions. So it'll be interesting to see when we come back to part 3 tomorrow. Let's look. Let me see. How long is part 3? Is part 3 incredibly long? We might have to split it up into 2 streams. Okay. Okay, yeah, here we go. Part 4 is right there. Oh yeah, part 3 is incredibly long. Super, super long. It's over 100 pages. So we're gonna split part 3 up into 2 streams probably. Because it goes from page 170, about, I'm gonna say 175 to 330. Can I break out my calculator for this real quick? 330 minus 175, 155, 155 pages? Okay, yeah, so 155 pages. Whoops. Okay. Divided by 2. Okay, so we can do that. That's easy. That's easily done. 77 pages. We did almost that this time. So yeah, so 77 pages isn't so bad. We can make that happen next time. So tomorrow I do plan to be streaming earlier in the day. And we're gonna start part 3 of Scythe. I hope you are enjoying it. If you're watching this video, I hope you're enjoying this book. If you haven't gotten your own copy of it, I highly recommend that you get your own copy, and also get the rest of the series, because if you like this book, there are 2 more books that are available in the series for you to read. And on top of that, Neal Shusterman has a ton of amazing novels that he has written. The one that I have recently read is called Dry. I read it a while ago, but it's non-science fiction, non-fantasy. It's more like a real life book about a very big apocalyptic kind of event, world-ending event, and it's as intense, if not more intense, than this series. There's several other books that I haven't read by him that I really want to read, so I'm putting them on my list. You should too. He's a great author. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoy reading it, and I hope you have as well. I've also hope you enjoyed my ramblings and casting on Fancast, even though the website is kind of slow. And I hope you enjoy my discussions about it, because, you know, I get really into it. I get really into this book. It's intense. Yeah, I can't talk enough about it. It's awesome. Okay, and that's it. That's it for the day. I'm going to head out. I'm going to get some food. I'm going to get some rest. I'm going to go into my little cocoon for a little bit. Maybe watch some TV or something. I don't know. I'm just going to rest a little bit this evening. And I'll be back tomorrow to read the next part of Scythe by Neal Shusterman. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Have an amazing evening. I'll see you in class. Bye.